Can you physically feel the heavy pressure completely surrounding a young scholar on the edge? They desperately want to see us fail, but I am rewriting the entire electrical circuit of this broken city. Listen to the heavy beating heart of the ultimate survivor. We blooming directly out of the cold concrete. I am staring directly at the blank pages of this heavy master's thesis under the flickering yellow bulb, sweating out the intense stress to the metropolitan jungle. They want to see a young man permanently locked inside the cold penitentiary steel, but my active mind is an incredibly dangerous weapon. I'm mathematically calculating the high voltage currents in the complex electrical power systems just to completely short circuit their corrupt political design. The police helicopter is shining the blindest spotlight through my broken blinds, but I refuse to lose my intense focus. My black analog pager is constantly vibrating on the wooden dresser, but I am strictly focused on surviving this extreme academic warfare to build a magnificent, legitimate kingdom for my beautiful lady. I am carefully tying these heavy satin ribbons in the pitch black darkness, desperately trying to craft the perfect floral bouquet out of this raw metrical touching pain just to see a smile through the thick chronic smoke. It is a massive invisible war, balancing the heavy books and the brutal survival tactics. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving the extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively rewiring the dark system with the heavy knowledge in my brain, graduating from the concrete and permanently breaking the iron chain. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving the extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively rewiring the dark system with the heavy knowledge in my brain, graduating from the concrete and permanently breaking the iron chain. I dropped the dusty cassette tape right into the dashboard of the classic convertible, turning the heavy enalo violent to the absolute maximum limit. The heavy bouncing bass line is aggressively shaking the chrome rims while I cruise down the dangerous Palm Tree Boulevard. The local hustlers are standing on the dark corners, but my specific hustle is mathematically calculating the exact resistance of the bridge to bring the true power back to my starving people. I pour a heavy splash of the dark Hennessy onto the hot pavement, paying the ultimate maximum respect to the brave soldiers who never even saw the inside of a college classroom. The jealous competitors are constantly plotting my violent downfall, completely laughing at a young man pursuing the higher education in the middle of a war zone. But I walk with the fierce pride of a fearless general, certain to roar underdogs to rate of street poetry into a massive academic masterpiece. My girl is waiting patiently while I burn the midnight oil, knowing mathematically that this heavy struggle is the only undeniable equation that leads to the ultimate freedom. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving the extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively reviving the bark system with that heavy knowledge in my brain, graduating from the concrete and permanently breaking the iron chain. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving the extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively reviving the dark system with the heavy knowledge in my brain, graduating from the concrete and permanently breaking that iron chain. Yeah. Through every single dark night, the heavy voltage keeps flowing. Keep your head completely up and never surrender your authentic rhyme to the system. The police helicopter is flying incredibly low tonight, actively scanning the broken pavement. Listen to the heavy, bleeding heartbeat of the concrete jungle. We are permanently under the microscope. I'm staring at the cracked ceiling fan, slowly spinning in the dark, violently sweating out the intense nightmares of the cold penitentiary still. I can physically hear my mother softly crying in the next room, because the heavy eviction notice is aggressively taped to our front wooden door. The cold metal is resting right underneath my thin mattress, a permanent dangerous companion in the metropolitan city that constantly tries to swallow my young soul completely alive. I strap the heavy bulletproof vest tightly over my white cotton shirt, actively preparing for a daily neighborhood combat before I either step onto the burning California asphalt. My black analog pager was constantly vibrating on the wooden dresser, but it only brings the tragic numerical codes about another lawyer brother violently bleeding out in the dirty alleyway. We are actively trapped inside the suffocating systemic maze, mathematically programmed to fail by the corrupt politicians smiling on the analog television screens. But I absolutely refuse to peacefully surrender to the extreme poverty. I am fiercely screaming my undeniable truth directly into the microphone until my vocal cords completely bleed. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving the extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively riding through the dark storm with the heavy steel on my lap, constantly dodging the shady detectives in the federal penitentiary trap. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving the extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively riding through the dark storm with the heavy steel on my lap, constantly dodging the shady detectives in the federal penitentiary trap. I dropped the desk to get sex tape right into the dashboard of the classic lowrider, turning the heavy analog volume completely into the maximum limit just to successfully drown out the wailing police siren. The heavy bouncing bass line is aggressively shaking the chrome rims while I cruise down the dangerous palm tree boulevard, blowing the thick chronic smoke directly into the humid evening breeze. The local news reporters are holding the heavy video cameras, constantly broadcasting our deepest personal tragedy for the cheap primetime entertainment. I pour a heavy splash of the dark liquor onto the hot pavement, paying the ultimate maximum respect to the brave soldiers who lost their physical lives over a microscopic piece of this broken territory. I am passionately fighting for the genuine liberation of my people, using these heavy poetic syllables to permanently document our beautiful and tragic struggle. The jealous competitors are constantly plotting my violent downfall, desperately wishing they could mathematically steal the heavy ambition burning directly inside my chest. I am a permanent target walking through a dangerous minefield, but I walk with the absolute fierce pride of a fearless general leading his troops into the final battle. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving in extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively riding through the dark storm with the heavy steel on my lap, constantly dodging the shady detectives in the federal penitentiary trap. They got a million jealous eyes permanently locked on my heavy silhouette, surviving in extreme poverty and the violent neighborhood threat. I am actively riding through the dark storm with the heavy steel on my lap, constantly dodging the shady detectives in the federal penitentiary trap. Yeah. Do every single dark and freezing night. There is a bright morning waving. Keep your heavy chin completely up, then never surrender your bedded soul. West Coast permanently. We riding directly against the heavy wind. Yeah. Can you physically feel the heavy pressure completely surrounding you? They are constantly watching my every single move through the broken blinds. Hit us in absolute war zone, just trying to breathe on these California streets. Pour a little dark liquor on the concrete for the fallen soldiers. Listen to the heavy beating heart of the ultimate survivor. I wake up violently sweating, reaching directly for the cold, heavy spill hitting safely underneath the mattress. The police helicopter is shining the blinding spotlight straight through my dirty window. A constant aggressive reminder that the corrupt authorities are relentlessly hunting a young man trying to survive the extreme poverty. I pour a heavy splash of the dark Hennessy directly onto the faded carpet for my genuine brother sleeping permanently in the cemetery dirt. The jealousy is a dangerous, deadly disease spreading rapidly through the neighborhood block. The exact same individuals who smiled in my face yesterday are currently dialing the quarter pay phone to completely destroy my physical freedom. I strapped a heavy Kevlar vest tightly across my chest, stepping out into the burning California sun with a completely fearless and defiant attitude. The black and alloy pager is constantly vibrating on my heavy leather belt, but I am entirely focused on completely escaping this suffocating concrete cage. They desperately want to physically chain my soul to the absolute bottom of the ocean, but I am fiercely fighting the heavy tidal wave with the relentless heart of a cornered lion. Every single time I step outside, I feel a million jealous eyes burning directly into my back. Surviving the violent metropolitan struggle, they completely dodging the heavy federal trap. They desperately wanna see me permanently buried inside the cold cemetery dirt, but I am riding for the city limits and relentlessly multiplying my heavy street work. Every single time I step outside, I feel a million jealous eyes burning directly into my back. Surviving the violent metropolitan struggle, they desperately wanna see me permanently buried inside the cold cemetery dirt, but I am riding for the city limits and relentlessly multiplying my heavy street work. I dropped the dusty cassette tape directly into the dashboard of the classic black convertible, turning the heavy volume dial into the bass and bass line. Completely shakes the rear view mirror. I am cruising slowly down the dangerous Palm Tree Avenue, smoking the heavy chronic and trying to permanently erase the extreme childhood trauma from my exhausted mind. And the local politicians are sitting comfortably in their expensive tailored suits, completely ignoring the starting families and the heavy gang violence, violently tearing our immediate community apart. I am the absolute undeniable voice of the voiceless, spitting the raw unadulterated street gospel directly into the analog microphone until my lungs completely collapse. We fighting a massive undocumented war on these ruthless concrete streets, actively dodging the heavy hollow points and the shady detectives trying to plant the fake evidence in the truck of the vehicle. I absolutely refuse to peacefully surrender to the systemic metropolitan pressure. I am holding my head incredibly high, demanding the absolute maximum respect from every single individual walking on this unforgiving pavement. Every single time I step outside, I feel a million jealous eyes burning directly into my back. Surviving the violent metropolitan struggle, it completely died in the heavy federal trap. They desperately wanna see me permanently buried inside the cold cemetery dirt, but I am about to do the city limits and relentlessly multiply my every street work. Step outside, I feel a million jealous eyes burning directly into my back. Surviving the violent metropolitan struggle, they desperately wanna see me permanently buried inside the cold cemetery dirt, but I am about to do the city limits and relentlessly multiply my heavy street work. They cannot successfully stop the authentic street destiny. Keep your eyes completely open and never let them see you crying. West Coast permanently, we riding directly into the burning sunset. Yeah, I am waking up with my own breath, turning into the freezing smoke, completely filling the dark bedroom. The heavy iron radiator in the corner, is absolutely dead. Just a cold piece of rusted metal, offering zero comfort against the brutal winter drop. Yeah, I pull the heavy military jacket completely over my freezing shoulders, staring out the cracked window, blast at the dark and depressing project courtyard. We are permanently trapped inside this massive concrete maze, constantly grinding our physical teeth down to the absolute bone just to mathematically secure a single hot meal. A local corner store is selling the stale bread and the cheap canned food behind the thick bulletproof glass, exactly like a dangerous maximum security prison. My black and analog pager is completely dead, no batteries and absolutely no incoming numerical messages. Just the heavy suffocating silence of the empty pockets. The young neighborhood kids are casually playing with the empty shell casings on the dirty pavement, completely normalized to the extreme. Metro bullshit and violence echoing through the narrow brick alleyways every single midnight. You can physically smell the heavy desperation mixing perfectly with the dark exhaust fume from the passing city buses. It is a permanent heavy weight on the human soul, mathematically calculating how to stretch a crumpled $5 bill for an entire miserable week. We breathing the heavy project dust and fighting the absolute freezing cold, watching the dark tragedies of the concrete jungle violently unfold. No bright future promise, just the rusty metal and the bitter pain. We survive in the extreme poverty and the unpredictable heavy rain. We breathing the heavy project dust and fighting the absolute freezing cold, watching the dark tragedies of the concrete jungle violently unfold. No bright future promise, just the rusty metal and the bitter pain. We survive in the extreme poverty and the unpredictable heavy rain. I step out of the heavy metal lobby door directly into the freezing midnight wind. The local hustlers are standing closely around the burning trash can, desperately rubbing the crack and bleeding hands together for a tiny fraction of the necessary heat. The unmarked police cruisers are slowly creeping past the rugged street lights, shining their blinding high beams directly into our completely exhausted eyes. They wanna mathematically break our heavy iron mentality, locking the best of the young brothers inside the cold steel cages for the absolute minor survival crimes. We are violently forced to navigate the treacherous metro coastings and minefield without a single compass, relying strictly on the paranoid street intuition just to make it back to the broken elevator alive. The older veterans are sitting on the freezing wooden park benches, drinking the cheap dark liquor directly from the brown paper bags and telling the tragic stories of the heavy dreams that completely died on this exact same asphalt. I am writing these garbed poetic syllables with a freezing ballpoint pen on a torn napkin, permanently documenting the heavy tears and the raw bloody knuckles of the completely forgotten individuals. The daily struggle is a massive heavy anchor actively pulling us toward the absolute pitch black bottom of the freezing ocean. We breathe in the heavy project dust and fighting the absolute freezing cold, watching the dark tragedies of the concrete jungle violently unfold. No bright future promise, just some rusty metal and the bitter pain. We survive in the extreme poverty and the unpredictable heavy rain. We breathe in the heavy project dust and fighting the absolute freezing cold, watching the dark tragedies of the concrete jungle violently unfold. No bright future promise, just the rusty metal and the bitter pain. We survive in the extreme poverty and the unpredictable heavy rain. Yeah, the heavy concrete constantly demands the absolute maximum sacrifice. Keep your heavy boots tightly laced and your eyes completely open in the dark. Queensbridge permanently. We fade in direct into the bitter I pull the heavy. I am waking up. I am waking up. Yeah, I am waking up.
own breath burning into the freezing smoke, completely filling the dark bedroom. The heavy eye radiator in the corner is absolutely dead. Just a cold piece of rusted metal, offering zero comfort. Yeah. Wait, waking up. I am waking up with my own breath turning into the freezing smoke. Waking up. With my own breath turning into the freezing smoke. I am waking up. I am waking up. I am waking up. I am waking up with my own breath turning into the freezing smoke. I put leaf fill in the dark bedroom. I am waking up with my own breath turning into the freezing smoke. I am waking up with my own breath. Waking up. I am waking up. With my own breath, I am waking up. I am waking up. I am waking up with my own breath, turning into the freezing smoke.
Yeah. We treating the public school systems exactly like a maximum security prison. Listen to the dark symphony of the rusty metal lockers violently slamming shut. The extreme survival mathematics. I am walking through the heavy metal detectors at the front entrance, staring directly into the paranoid eyes of the rival crew standing strictly by the water fountain. The freezing morning wind is howling violently outside, but the actual extreme danger is completely trapped inside these dirty brick walls. We are not carrying the heavy textbooks to mathematically solve the complex algebraic equations. We are using the thick history books to successfully hide the heavy metal and the raw contraband. The oblivious teachers in the cheap wrinkled suits are frantically writing on the dusty chalkboards, completely blind to the highly tactical military operations happening in the exact back row of the freezing classroom. My black analog pager is securely clipped to my oversized denim jeans, silently vibrating with the urgent numeric codes from my brother waiting nervously by the broken payphone in the cafeteria. The school bell violently rings exactly like a terrifying prison siren, signaling the massive chaotic movement through the narrow crowded corridors where the fake individuals constantly get mathematically tested. We navigating the dangerous school hallways exactly like the military trench, surviving deep stream project violence, sitting on the wooden detention bench. The real mathematics is strictly counting the dirty paper in the bathroom stall. We holding the heavy perimeter and permanently lean against the brick wall. We navigating the dangerous school hallways exactly like a military trench, surviving deep stream project violence, sitting on the wooden detention bench. The real mathematics is strictly counting the dirty paper in the bathroom stall. We holding the heavy perimeter and permanently lean against the brick wall. I slide my rusty combination lock open, carefully stashing the heavy winter coat and checking the dark corners of the metal locker for any planet evidence. The local security guards are constantly patrolling the perimeter, oppressively searching the canvas backpacks for the illegal substances. But our underground distribution network is mathematically bulletproof. We completely skip the useless physical education classes to run the heavy dice games underneath the cold metal bleachers, stacking the crumpled $1 bills while the
freezing rain aggressively hits the gymnasium roof. I look out the scratch glass window of the suspension room, seeing the exact same desperate project buildings that organically forge my heavy iron mentalities. The principal is constantly threatening me with the permanent expulsion, shouting until his face turns completely red. But I am mathematically calculating my next financial move on a torn piece of yellow loose leaf paper. We are graduating strictly from the informational university of the cold basement, mastering the dark street sciences and permanently surviving the extreme pressure of the concrete. Vegetational jumps. Wait. We navigating the dangerous school hallways and jack me like a military trench, surviving the extreme project violence, sitting on the wooden detention bench. The real mathematics is strictly counting the dirty paper in the bathroom stall. We holding the heavy perimeter and permanently lean against the brick wall. We navigating the dangerous school hallways exactly like a military trench, surviving the extreme project violence, sitting on the wooden detention bench. The real mathematics is strictly counting the dirty paper in the bathroom stall. We holding the heavy perimeter and permanently lean against the brick wall. Yeah, the heavy iron doors never forgive the weak students. Keep your tactical vision completely clear. From the final and hallowed bell rings, Queensbridge permanently. You're fading directly into the freezing hallway fog. The infamous. Yeah, the infamous foundation, Queensbridge to the grave. Feel that freezing chill crawling directly up your spine. It is strictly about the bloodline and the chosen few. Listen to the dark symphony of the pavement. I am standing on the freezing tar roof of the project building, looking down at the broken street lights and the violently flashing red sirens. The cold wind is blowing straight through my heavy military jacket, but the extreme daily paranoia keeps my blood boiling completely hot. I only surround myself with the absolute authentic soldiers, the quiet individuals who never hesitate to grip the cold steel when the unpredictable, chaotic violence erupts. We survive the absolute darkest winters, sharing the exact same stale corner store bread and the cheap brown liquor, hiding from the undercover detectives in the pitch black elevator shafts. When you grow up in this specific concrete war zone, you mathematically calculate every single facial expression, because the fake smiles are usually hiding the sharpest rusty knives. But my true associates communicate with a solid nod. We can physically sense the incoming danger long before the rival crews even turn the dark corner. We took the heavy devastating losses and buried our fallen brothers in the frozen dirt, pouring the dark cognac on the concrete and swearing an absolute oath of permanent retaliation. We strictly walk through the valley of the shadows with the iron tight grip, surviving the extreme project violence in the sinking metropolitan ship. Authentic brotherhood is the only currency that actually matters tonight. We holding the heavy metal and permanently defending our original right. We strictly walk through the valley of the shadows with the iron tight grip, surviving the extreme project violence in the sinking metropolitan ship. Authentic brotherhood is the only currency that actually matters tonight. We holding the heavy metal and permanently defending our original right. I ain't sitting in the smoky project stairwell, passing a heavy blunt to my left and watching the burning ash drop directly onto my scuffed suede boots. My black pager is securely fastened to my waist, but I am entirely focused on the hushed conversations echoing off the dirty brick walls. We do not accept any new applications for this specific family circle. The perimeter is mathematically sealed with the heavy barbed wire in the fully loaded chambers. I remember that terrifying midnight when the enemy violently ambushed our specific flock. The deafening sound of the heavy artillery completely shattered when the humid summer air. My brother did not desperately run for the safety of the metal doors. He stepped directly into the flying lead and aggressively returned a heavy fire just to secure my safe passage. That specific level of undeniable loyalty cannot be mathematically purchased. With a fixed stack of dirty $100 bills, we are permanently bound by the heavy chronic struggle, navigating this treacherous maze with the absolute maximum discipline. The corrupted authorities are constantly trying to break our heavy silence inside the freezing interrogation rooms, but our lips remain permanently stitched together by the sacred code of the infamous streets. We strictly walk through the valley of the shadows with the iron tight grip. Surviving the extreme project violence in the sinking metropolitan ship. Our Sanic brotherhood is the only currency that actually matters tonight. We holding the heavy metal and prominently defending our original right. We strictly walk through the valley of the shadows with the iron tight grip. Surviving the extreme project violence in the sinking metropolitan ship. Our Sanic brotherhood is the only currency that actually matters tonight. We holding the heavy metal and permanently defending our original right. The Ayurvedic circle never breaks under the heavy pressure. Keep your eyes completely open and trust absolutely nobody outside the perimeter. The infamous legacy, permanently. We fading directly into the cold midnight wind.
Feel that freezing cold wind blowing directly through the project courtyard. This is strictly for the real individuals who stood on the bloody concrete right beside them. The infamous reality of the neighborhood block. Listen to the dark, absolute truth. I am sitting on the phasing concrete staircase of the project building, pulling the heavy hood of my dark winter jacket directly over my freezing head. We grew up sharing the exact same rusty razor blades in the cheap corner store liquor, watching the broken yellow street lights aggressively flicker over the dangerous pavement. You absolutely cannot buy a specific type of heavy loyalty with the paper money. It is strictly forged in the absolute darkest alleyways when the heavy metal suddenly starts flying through the midnight air. My genuine brothers never hesitate for a single millisecond to step directly into the chaotic crossfire, tightly gripping the cold steel and violently defending a microscopic piece of the broken asphalt. We used to hide the heavy contraband deep inside the rusty elevator shaft, silently communicating with the brief eye contact while the undercover detectives slowly patrol the dangerous perimeter. The extreme daily paranoia keeps my eyes permanently wide open, but when I look at the quiet soldier sitting right next to me in the dark, I feel the absolute impenetrable armor of the genuine street brotherhood. We split the cheap cigars and pour the dark brown liquor directly onto the dirty concrete, heavily mourning the fallen soldiers who caught the fatal hollow points before they even reached the age of 21. We walk through the freezing valley of the project shadows together, surviving the extreme violence and the unpredictable winter weather. Real brothers never flow when the heavy police interrogation begins. We carrying the heavy burden of our collective neighborhood sins. We walk through the freezing valley of the project shadows together, surviving the extreme violence and the unpredictable winter weather. Real brothers never fall when the heavy police interrogation begins. We carrying the heavy burden of our collective neighborhood sins. The fake individuals constantly try to quietly infiltrate our tight circles, smiling with the shiny gold teeth. My secret nigga in the local precinct from the corner payphone. But our street intuition is incredibly sharp. We can physically smell the rat poison floating in the freezing cold project breeze from 3 entire blocks away. I clearly remember that terrifying midnight when the rival crew aggressively rushed off, specific due to flow. The deafening sound of a heavy artillery violently echoing through the narrow brick hallways. My brother did not desperately run towards the emergency exit. He stood firmly by my side and aggressively emptied the entire heavy clip into the absolute pitch black darkness, perfectly willing to trade his own physical breath to ensure my permanent survival. That is the undeniable heavy truth of this metrical center war zone.
My black pager is securely clipped to my waist, silently vibrating with the urgent numeric codes. But I am entirely focused on the present moment, sitting on the wooden park benches with the only individuals I actually trust with my physical life. We do not wear the expensive Italian suits or drink the crystal champagne. We are strictly wearing the heavy waterproof boots and drinking the cheap cognac straight from the glass bottle. I am writing these dark poetic verses on a torn piece of the yellow notepad, permanently documenting the heavy sacrifices of my true associates. We walk through the freezing valley of the project shadows together, surviving the extreme violence in the unpredictable winter weather. We are brothers never fall when the heavy police interrogation begins. We carrying the heavy burden of our collective neighborhood sins. We walk through the freezing valley of the project shadows together, surviving the extreme violence in the unpredictable winter weather. Real brothers never fall when the heavy police interrogation begins. We carry the heavy burden of our collective neighborhood sin. The absolute grim reality of a concrete jungle. Keep your eyes completely open, and this circle incredibly tidy. Queensbridge permanently. We fading directly into the project darkness. Pull up. Yeah. Pull up. Pull up the heavy mahogany chairs to the circular table. We pouring the vintage champagne exclusively for the authentic day ones, the genuine soldiers who survived the freezing Brooklyn rain right by my side. Listen to the heavyweight toast from the absolute bars. I am sitting inside the dimly lit back room of the expensive Italian restaurant, looking directly into the tired eyes of my original neighborhood brothers. We used to split the cheap corner store sandwiches into 4 equal pieces, shivering in the dark project stairwells while the unmarked police cruisers slowly circled the block like hungry mechanical sharks. When the violent street wars erupted and the heavy metal started flying through the humid summer air, these exact same individuals stood shoulder to shoulder with me on the dangerous pavement. Nobody ever folded under the intense metropolitan pressure. Nobody whispered a single cowardly syllable to the corrupt detectives sitting in the smoky interrogation rooms. Now we are exclusively wearing the custom-tailored double-breasted suits and the heavy diamond pinky rings, resting our scuffed Timberland boots on the imported Persian rugs. I watch my loyal associate smoothly cut his heavily buttered lobster tail, mathematically remembering when we had to desperately scrape the dirty silver coins together just to afford the greasy Chinese takeout. We elevated from the absolute bottom of the concrete food chain to the luxurious penthouse suites, heavily dominating the dangerous metropolitan game with a completely impenetrable circle of absolute trust. We took the freezing concrete struggle and mathematically divided the massive pain. We stood together through the dark nights in the heavy Brooklyn rain. From the completely empty pockets to the heavy vaults overflowing with the cash. We built this unbreakable brotherhood directly from the dirty cigarette ash. We took the freezing concrete struggle and mathematically divided the massive pain. We stood together through the dark nights and the heavy Brooklyn rain. From the completely empty pockets to the heavy vaults overflowing with the cash. We built this unbreakable brotherhood directly from the dirty cigarette ash. I pour a heavy splash of the premium dark cognac directly onto the expensive carpet, banging the ultimate maximum respect to the loyal soldiers who caught the fatal bullets before we successfully reached this luxurious destination. The legendary names are permanently spray painted in bright colors on the brick walls of the avenue, a constant heavy reminder of the unpredictable mythical jump on lethality. My black pager is securely clipped to my leather belt, silently vibrating with the lucrative numerical codes from the outer state supplies. But the heavy business is completely paused when I am breaking a warm bread with my chosen family. The jealous competitors are constantly trying to actively infiltrate our tight circle, sending the beautiful women with their hidden motives to gather the sensitive information. But our foundational loyalty is mathematically bulletproof, organically forged in the dangerous underground trenches where the fake individuals instantly evaporate into the thin air. We clink the heavy crystal glasses together in the exact center of the table, loudly celebrate when another successful year of the absolute street dominance and the raw authentic love. I am heavily dropping these cinematic poetic syllables strictly for the true associates who never switch their original colors when the massive storm aggressively hit the neighborhood. We took the freezing concrete struggle and mathematically divided the massive pain. We stood together through the dark nights and the heavy Brooklyn rain. From the completely empty pockets to the heavy vaults overflowing with the cash. Full of, we built this unbreakable brotherhood directly from the dirty cigarette ash. The content circle remains completely impenetrable. I pull a leap the heavy vault, securely locked, and the vintage champagne flowing. Brooklyn permanently. We stepping back into the velvet shadow.
Step inside the velvet ropes. Yeah. Step inside the velvet ropes. Yeah. Stepping. Step inside the velvet ropes. We leaving the physical streets for a minute to bless the analog tape. Listen to the heavyweight architect construct the perfect verse without a single piece of paper. The absolute undisputed truth of the microphone. I step inside the dimly lit vocal booth, smelling exactly like the expensive imported cologne in the thick Dominican cigar smoke. The audio engineer is physically sweating while carefully adjusting the heavy analog sliders, making absolutely sure the 2-inch magnetic tape is properly capturing my incredible vocal weight. I remember standing in the freezing Brooklyn rain with the dirty water seeping directly into my scuffed boots, aggressively battling the jealous neighborhood rivals under the broken street lights. We did not possess the expensive studio time or the professional's acoustic foam on the brick walls. Our original microphone was strictly the rolled up newspaper, and our heavy beat was a bare fist violently slamming against the metal project door. I mentally and mathematically formulate these incredibly complex syllables, weaving the dark cinematic details completely inside my brain without ever touching a yellow legal pad or a cheap ballpoint pen. My mind is a massive underground bank vault storing the endless immaculate rhymes, permanently ready to crush the fake imposters who are desperately trying to steal my majestic Brooklyn flow. I am wearing a custom tailored double-crusted suit, spitting the raw unadulterated street gospel directly over the dusky vinyl scratches and completely paralyzing the entire metropolitan room. We took the freezing corner ciphers and built a luxurious Mafia throne, commanding the absolute maximum respect every time I touch the heavy microphone. From the dirty project stairwells to the expensive mahogany executive suites, we mathematically dropping the heavy poetry directly over the analog beats. We took the freezing corner cipher and built a luxurious Mafia throne, commanding the absolute maximum respect every time I touch the heavy microphone. From the dirty pudding stairwells to the expensive mahogany executive suites, we mathematically dropping the heavy poetry directly over the analog beat. Rival MCs are nervously sweating inside their cheap cotton shirts, listening to my heavy cassette tapes in the dark and vinily pulling their hair out in pure absolute frustration. I desperately try to perfectly mimic my lengthy confident delivery, but their weak vocal cords completely like the heavy high-end density that is exclusively forged in the dangerous metropole touchage and trenches. I'm sitting comfortably inside the velvet VIP
VIP section of the underground club, pouring the vintage champagne into the crystal flute. While the local gets jockey, he prestably spins my heavy instrumental on the dual turntables. The beautiful ladies wearing the thick gold bamboo earrings are completely mesmerized by the flawless rhythm, while the seasoned street hustlers slowly nod their heads in absolute synchronized harmony. We elegant this entire magnificent hip-hop culture, from the dusty cardboard boxes on the concrete pavement to the absolute highest pinnacle of the international luxury lifestyle. My black pager is the only clip to my leather belt, but I am completely ignoring the vibrating numerical messages, because I am deeply hypnotized by the heavy boom bap drum break. I am the undisputed king of this Pacific concrete jungle, heavily dropping the magnificent mafioso poetry and permanently locking the entire music industry in a tight physical chokehold. We took the freezing corner ciphers and built a luxurious Mafia throne, commanding we absolute maximum respect every time I touch the heavy microphone. From the dirty project stairwells to the expensive mahogany executive suites. We mathematically dropping the heavy poetry directly over the analog beat. The undisputed ruler of the vocal booth. Keep the heavy vinyl spinning. In the analog meters, completely in the red. Brooklyn permanently. We stepping back into the velvet shadows.
Yeah. Turn the heavy bass up till the analog speakers completely blow out. We taking it right back to the original park jams and the scratch vinyl. Listen to the heavyweight champion break down the authentic architecture of the culture. Yeah, I'm stepping out into the humid Brooklyn summer night, wearing the heavy waterproof boots and the colorful imported sweater. I clearly remember when the entire culture was strictly contained inside the chain link fences of the local neighborhood parks. We used to illegally wire the massive wooden speakers directly into the city street lights, just to keep the dusty turntable spinning until the early morning. The local disc jockeys were carrying the heavy plastic crates filled entirely with the rare soul records of 5 flights of dark concrete stairs. The young hungry soldiers were violently battling for the absolute maximum respect on the dirty asphalt, spitting the heavy razor sharp syllables without a single microphone in sight. I was sitting quietly on the cold metal bench, writing my complex criminal narratives directly onto the brown paper grocery bags with a cheap stolen pen. We did not have the luxurious corporate backing or the shiny magazine covers. We had the raw, undeniable talent and the heavy survival instinct, organically forged in the dangerous project lobbies. Now I'm watching the entire globe heavily embrace the magnificent street poetry that we mathematically designed in the freezing shadows. We built this massive global empire directly from the broken concrete. Dropping the heavy authentic syllables over the dusty analog beats. Yeah. From the dark park jams to the expensive velvet VIP sections, we mathematically commanding the absolute maximum respect and the street connections. We built this massive global empire directly from the broken concrete. Dropping the heavy authentic syllables over the dusty analog beats. From the dark park jams to the expensive velvet VIP sections, we mathematically commanding the absolute maximum respect and the street connections. I'm pouring the premium dark liquor directly onto the pavement, paying the ultimate heavy respect to the original pioneers who officially laid down the thick foundation. The graffiti artists were risking their physical freedom in the dangerous underground train yards, painting the massive colorful masterpieces on the heavy metal subway cars, just to beautifully broadcast our existence to the entire metropolis. The break dancers were spinning fiercely on the flattened cardboard boxes,
turning the gritty neighborhood corners into the absolute center of the creative universe. Now the corporate executives are wearing the expansive tailored suits, sitting in the high-rise mahogany boardrooms and desperately trying to package an authentic fame for the massive financial profit. But I am maintaining the absolute undisputed monopoly over the genuine sound, dictating the heavy industry standards while comfortably sipping the vintage champagne from the crystal flutes. I completely transform the raw metropolitan struggle into a luxurious mafioso lifestyle. But my heavy heartbeat will permanently remain synchronized with the scratch of the analog needle. I am the physical embodiment of the golden era, painting the vivid cinematic pictures with the heavy Brooklyn vocabulary and permanently securing a magnificent legacy. We built this massive global empire directly from the broken concrete. Dropping the heavy authentic syllables over the dusty analog beats. From the dark park jams to the expensive velvet VIP sections, we mathematically commanding the absolute maximum respect and the street connection. We built this massive global empire directly from the broken concrete. Dropping the heavy authentic syllables over the dusty analog beats. From the dark park jams to the expensive velvet VIP sections, we mathematically commanding the absolute maximum respect and the street connection. Yeah. The original elements of the concrete jungle. Yeah. Keep the turntable spinning and the heavy microphones completely hot. Brooklyn permanently. We stepping back into the shadows.
Yeah. We taking the authentic Brooklyn Mafia flavor, all the way across the Atlantic. Listen to the heavy roar of the massive Continental Stadium. The absolute heavyweight champion of the green turf has arrived. I'm stepping out of the dark concrete tunnel wearing the crisp, oversized warm-up suit. The heavy gold Jesus piece resting completely cold against my chest. I remember kicking the flat heavy leather ball against the brick project walls, dodging the broken glass on the dirty pavement, just trying to mathematically perfect my heavy strike. Now I'm standing directly in the center of the massive European arena. The blinding floodlights reflecting aggressively off the wet, muddy pitch, while 90,000 screaming fanatics are fiercely chanting my last name. My black pager is securely left inside the metal locker room cabinet, constantly vibrating with the heavy numerical bets from the underground gambling syndicates. The opposing defenders are sweating profusely, staring at my heavy calculated movements and mathematically calculating how to successfully stop the undisputed boss of the beautiful game. I'm not just playing a simple physical sport for the cheap entertainment. I am dictating the entire tempo of the championship match with the absolute precision of a decorated mafia general. I drop a heavy shoulder, easily bypassing the desperate sliding tackles, leaving the rival players completely eating the wet dirt while I gracefully chip the heavy ball directly into the top corner of the white netting. We celebrate the magnificent goal by casually jogging toward the corner flag, completely ignoring the flashing camera bulbs while my loyal teammates pile on top of me like a massive mountain of pure victory. We mathematically dominating the heavy mud and the wet green grass, shattering the analog scoreboard and completely breaking the glass. From the dirty concrete corners to the massive European throne, we lifting the heavy silver cup and breaking the competitor's bone. We mathematically dominating the heavy mud and the wet green grass, shattering the analog scoreboard and completely breaking the glass. From the dirty concrete corners to the massive European throne, we lifted the heavy silver cup and breaking competitors' bone. I'm sitting comfortably inside the human locker room, peeling off the muddy jersey and immediately wrapping my massive frame inside a heavy imported silk robe. The club president is actively popping the corks on the expensive vintage champagne bottles, pouring the bubbling liquid directly into the crystal flutes to celebrate our massive continental triumph. We are watching the blurry analog replays on the heavy tube television, sitting in the corner laughing incredibly loud at the foolish goalkeeper who
desperately dived entirely the wrong way. The jealous rival managers are angrily smoking the cheap cigarettes in the dark hallways, tightly gripping the wooden clipboards and trying to figure out how to successfully defeat my untouchable tactical blueprints. But my Brooklyn Street intuition easily translates directly to the football pitch. I can physically smell the bitter fear floating in the cold night air long before the referee even blows his heavy metal whistle. I tell my personal driver to pull the 95 luxury sedan completely up to the stadium exit, stepping out into the pouring rain with the heavy black umbrella and the dark Versace shades. We are heading directly to the exclusive underground VIP lounge, dropping the heavy cigar ashes directly onto the expensive Persian rugs and signing the massive paper contracts with a heavy fountain pen. I am the absolute undisputed king of this metropolitan game, painting the cinematic masterpieces with my heavy leather cleats and bringing the street swagger directly to the international stage. We mathematically dominating the heavy mud
and the wet green grass,
shattering the analog scoreboard
and completely breaking the glass.
From the dirty concrete corners
to the massive European throne,
we lifting the heavy silver cup and breaking the competitor's bone. We mathematically dominating the heavy mud
and the wet green grass,
shattering the analog scoreboard
and completely breaking the glass.
From the dirty concrete corners
to the massive European throne,
we lifting the heavy silver cup and breaking the competitor's bone. Yeah, the beautiful game mathematically mastered by the street heavyweight. Keep your heavy boots laced tightly, and your vision perfectly clear. Continental champions permanently. Yeah, we stepping out into the foggy night. Let the heavy analog school bell ring loudly through the dusty corridors. Welcome to the public education system, Brooklyn style. With a real complex mathematics is strictly calculated in the crowded hallways. Yeah. Listen to the absolute magnificent truth of the classroom. I'm walking slowly through the heavy metal double doors, wearing the fresh Timberland boots and the oversized colorful Coogee sweater. The strict principal is standing by the lockers with the heavy wooden clipboard, watching my every single move, because he knows I am completely dominating the underground hallway economy. I sit directly in the back row of the freezing mathematics classroom, ignoring the dusty chalkboard and the boring historical lectures, because I'm already mentally calculating the massive financial profit margins. My heavy black pager is securely clipped to my denim jeans, silently vibrating against the plastic chair with the urgent numerical codes from the older associates waiting by the corner payphone outside. The frustrated teacher is aggressively tapping the wooden desk with a yellow pencil, constantly telling me that I will absolutely never amount to a single legitimate thing in this competitive metropolitan world. But I just smile and casually adjust the heavy gold chain, hiding completely underneath my cotton shirt, knowing mathematically that my street curriculum is significantly more advanced than the outdated history textbooks. I'm actively skipping the third period to shoot the ivory dice in the Smoky Boys bathroom, exchanging the crumpled single-dollar bills and building a massive empire right next to the broken porcelain sinks. We learning the heavy survival tactics and completely skipping the regular class, watching the slow analog clock ticking through the scratch window glass. From the dusty school lockers to the absolute top of the financial game, we mathematically chasing the heavy paper and building a legendary name. We learning the heavy survival tactics and completely skipping the regular class, watching the slow analog clock ticking through the scratch window glass. From the dusty school lockers to the absolute top of the financial game, we mathematically chasing the heavy paper and building a legendary name. I smoothly slide open my rusty metal locker, completely ignoring the useless chemistry books and grabbing the heavy brown paper bags filled with the highly demanded contraband. I am actively distributing the heavy analog mixtapes and the imported candy bars to the desperate students between the loud ringing of the mechanical periods. The guidance counselor calls me into the cramped office with the cheap fluorescent light and handing me a stack of useless college brochures and lecturing me about the proper legal pathway
ways to success, but I am looking directly at his scuffed leather shoes and his cheap wrinkled suit, instantly realizing that I am already generating a significantly higher weekly income than the completely exhausted educational staff we used to hide from the angry security guards in the dark auditorium, eating the cheap cafeteria food and plotting the magnificent escape from the suffocating concrete prison. I'm writing these heavy poetic verses directly onto the yellow legal notepads instead of finishing the mandatory homework assignments, perfectly structuring my complex syllables to permanently escape the terrible cycle of the minimum wage. I am the absolute undisputed valedictorian of these dangerous Brooklyn streets, graduating with the highest possible honors directly from the unforgiving university of the cold pavement. We learning the heavy survival tactics and completely skipping the regular class, watching the slow analog clock ticking through the scratch window glass. From the dusty school lockers to the absolute top of the financial game, we mathematically chasing the heavy paper and building a legendary name. We learning the heavy survival tactics and completely skipping the regular class, watching the slow analog clock ticking through the scratch window glass. From the dusty school lockers to the absolute top of the financial game, we mathematically chasing the heavy paper and building a legendary name. The most valuable metropolitan lessons are never actually written on the chalkboard. Class is officially dismissed for the heavyweights. Brooklyn permanently. We stepping directly out into the afternoon sun. Yeah. Live from the Bedford-Stuyvesant epicenter. Take a slow walk down the memory lane with the heavyweight, where the concrete cracks and the heavy dreams are mathematically manufactured. Listen to the undeniable symphony of the block. I am rolling slowly down the familiar avenue in the midnight black luxury sedan, watching the heavy steam rise directly from the rusty manhole covers. The broken street lights are flickering over the corner bodega where the young soldiers are currently gathered, aggressively rolling the ivory dice against the cold brick wall. You can physically smell the heavy mix of the cheap Chinese takeout and the thick cigar smoke completely dominating the humid evening breeze. A desperate individual was standing inside the broken glass payphone booth, frantically dialing the operator with a handful of silver coins, hoping to mathematically secure his next temporary escape. I remember wearing the scuffed Timberland boots and the oversized hand-me-down jackets, staining on this exact same dangerous intersection while the unmarked police cruisers slowly circled the perimeter like hungry metallic sharks. The heavy analog boombox is sitting on the milk crate, blasting the dusty cassette tape so loud it physically rattles the dirty project windows on the third floor. This is the authentic grim reality of the metropolitan jungle, a freezing cold environment that forces the young boys to rapidly transform into the ruthless heavy generals just to physically survive the brutal winter season. We breathe the heavy smog and navigate the dangerous Brooklyn nights, constantly dodging the jealous shadows and the violently flashing red lights. From the dirty corner pavement to the absolute top of the food chain, we mathematically conquered the struggle and completely mastered the pain. We breathe the heavy smog and navigate the dangerous Brooklyn nights, constantly dodging the jealous shadows and the violently flashing red lights. From the dirty corner pavement to the absolute top of the food chain, we mathematically conquered the struggle and completely mastered the pain. I tell the driver to pull a heavy vehicle directly up to the curb, stepping out into the familiar atmosphere, wearing the flaws and imported silk and the heavy dough Jesus piece. The local neighborhood veterans immediately stop their loud conversations, tipping the brims of their caps and paying the absolute maximum respect to the undisputed neighborhood king. My black pager is securely clipped to my leather belt, staying completely silent for a minute while I drop a crisp $100 bill into the palm of the young kid selling the daily newspapers. I am actively looking at the exact same rusty fire escapes where we used to hide the heavy contraband in the round paper bags, successfully dodging the federal agents, hiding in the dark unmarked bags. The beauty
beautiful neighborhood women are sitting on the concrete stoop, rocking the heavy gold bamboo earrings and watching the entire block operate with a magnificent rhythm. We lost way too many loyal associates to these unforgiving street corners. The legendary names permanently spray painted in the bright colors on the memorial brick walls. I am physically elevated. Sibylla Julius' penthouse waits now, dripping the Vincent champagne from the crystal flutes. But my heavy heartbeat will forever remain completely synchronized with the gritty mechanical pulse of this specific concrete avenue. Heavy smog, you navigate the dangerous Brooklyn nights, constantly dodging until the shadows and the violently flashing red lights. From the Gertie core to beatment to the absolute top of the food tank, we mathematically conquered the struggle and completely mastered the dance. We the heavy smog and navigate the dangerous Brooklyn nights, constantly dodging the jealous shadows and the violently flashing red lights. From the Gertie core to pavement to the absolute top of the food chain, we mathematically conquered the struggle and completely mastered the bang. Yeah. You can mathematically extract the man from the dangerous neighborhood. But the heavy neighborhood permanently resides inside the man. Brooklyn, stand up. We fading directly into the thick midnight fog.
Look, yeah, look directly out the crack window and observe the absolute belly of the beast. This is the exact concrete soil where the heavy champions are mathematically grown. Listen to the undeniable heartbeat of the avenue. I'm staring directly out of the dirty 7th floor window of the massive project building, watching the entire metropolitan and ecosystem operate under the dim orange street lights. You can physically hear the heavy boombox blasting the dusty and analog cassette tape down on the freezing pavement, mixing perfectly with the distant wailing of the police sirens. The broken elevator constantly smells like the cheap malt liquor and the heavy cigar smoke, forcing the exhausted mothers to carry the heavy brown paper bags up the dark concrete stairwells. I observe the young hungry soldiers rolling the ivory dice against the graffiti-covered brick wall, desperately praying for a lucky numerical combination to permanently stakes this fefferty for poverty. The local bodega owner is standing nervously behind the thick bulletproof glass, exchanging the crumpled $1 bills for the stale bread and the cold sodas, while the neighborhood hustlers mathematically calculate the next financial move outside the front door. The yellow taxi cabs completely refuse to cross the invisible geographical borders into our specific territory after the sun violently drops behind the city skyline. But this is the exact same dirt that permanently shaped my heavy iron mentality, teaching me how to successfully navigate the dangerous sharks and the venomous snakes hiding in the dark alleyways. It's the undeniable heavy pulse of the dangerous Brooklyn streets, where the hungry corner hustlers completely refuse to accept the bitter defeats. We navigate the dark alleys and the violently flashing red police lights, surviving the freezing concrete and the unpredictable metropolitan nights. This is undeniable heavy pulse of the dangerous Brooklyn street, where the hungry corner hustler completely refuse to accept the bitter defeats. We navigate the dark alleys and the violently flashing red police lights, surviving the freezing concrete and the unpredictable metropolitan nights. I step out of the heavy metal door into the hell at night air, wearing the crisp oversized denim jacket and the heavy waterproof boots. The local corner veterans are sitting on the overturned plastic milk crate, sharing the dark premium liquor and telling the legendary historical stories about the associates who never managed to make it back to the neighborhood block. My black pager is silently vibrating on my hip, but I am taking my absolute time to physically absorb the gritty
atmosphere, my original roots. You can feel the heavy desperation flowing in the atmosphere, with constant physical pressure that violent me crushes the weak individuals and mathematically crystallizes the genuine diamonds. The rival crews are actively whispering in the shadows, tightly gripping the heavy metal underneath their oversized, colorful sweaters, completely paranoid and ready to mathematically defend the microscopic piece of the broken asphalt. But my physical presence immediately drops the temperature on the entire avenue. The absolute undisputed king walking casually through his original kingdom, without a single ounce of fear in his heart. I elevated my entire operation to the luxurious penthouse suites and the expensive crystal champagne flutes. But my heavy soul will permanently remain anchored to these freezing project hallways. I am painting this cinematic masterpiece, strictly for the individuals who completely understand the beautiful struggle of the metroid stubble of survival. That undeniable. The concrete jungle never actually sleep. I'll remember the exact coordinates where you originally started the heavy marathon. Brooklyn permanently. We fading out into the thick city fog. No. Got it.
I wake up looking at the heavy gold chain, resting comfortably on my chest, but my mind automatically travels back to the freezing Brooklyn projects. I clearly remember the empty refrigerator and the cold radiators, listening to the police sirens wailing through the dark metrocultural night. My older brother was the absolute undisputed heavyweight champion of our concrete block, wearing the oversized colorful sweaters and the heavy Timberland boots. He stepped onto the dangerous pavement with a fearless attitude, absorbing the massive street pressure and taking the absolute maximum risk just to make sure our family survived. When the local corner hustlers tried to aggressively pull me into the dark alleyways and hand me the illegal packages, he stepped directly in front of me and completely blocked the doorway with his massive frame. He forcefully told me to keep my young mind mathematically focused on the heavy school books while he stood out on the freezing intersection, catching the dirty looks from the rival crew. I used to silently watch him count the crumpled paper bills on the wooden kitchen table under the dim yellow light, wrapping the dirty cash in the thick rubber bands and carefully hiding it completely behind the analog radio. It was playing an incredibly dangerous and deadly game with the federal authorities actively trading his own physical safety to secure a bright and prosperous future for my innocent soul. We survived the freezing Brooklyn winter strictly because of that heavy brotherhood. He planted his feet in the dangerous dirt, completely understood, trading his own physical freedom so I can mathematically elevate, shielding my young eyes from the absolute darkest street hate. We survived the freezing Brooklyn winter strictly because of the heavy brotherhood. He planted his feet in the dangerous dirt and completely understood, trading his own physical freedom so I can mathematically elevate, shielding my young eyes from the absolute darkest street hate. Now we are sitting comfortably inside the luxurious penthouse suite, pouring the expensive vintage champagne directly into the crystal glasses. He is sitting right across the mahogany table, wearing a tailored Italian suit, cooking at the massive empire we successfully built from the absolute bottom of the garbage chute. My black pager is constantly buzzing with the heavy numerical codes, but I passed the physical device directly to him because he is the original grand architect of these lucrative roads. I will never forget that terror sign midnight when the unmarked police cruisers violently rushed our neighborhood block, the flashing red lights aggressively reflecting off the wet pavement. He
Grab the heavy metal in the physical stash, sprinting directly toward the chain link fence to draw the absolute maximum attention away from my vulnerable location. He took the heavy fall and sat behind the cold steel bars for 3 long agonizing years, never shedding a single tear and refusing to speak a single syllable to the corrupt detective. That is the ultimate definition of absolute, unbreakable loyalty, the genuine royal bloodline operating in the meadow of the gritty concrete jungle. The fake associates will constantly smile at your face and evaporate when the heavy rain begins to fall, but your true blood will permanently stand right beside you and take the heavy bullets. I am dedicating every platinum plaque and every single crisp $100 bill to the man who permanently secured my magnificent elevation.
Oh, we survived the freezing Brooklyn lenses strictly because of the heavy brotherhood. He planted his feet in the dangerous dirt and completely understood, trading his own physical freedom so I could mathematically elevate, shielding my young eyes from that absolute darkest street.
Blood is permanently thicker than the vintage champagne. Always pay the maximum respect to the original teachers. Brooklyn, forever. We're stepping out into the glorious light.
BM salute. Check it. I am waking up, bursting on nigga Portersil pillows, wrapping my massive frame inside the colorful cootie sweater. Before I even step onto the expensive Persian rug, I remember the dark, freezing nights when my pockets were completely empty, standing on the dangerous corner trying to flip a tiny piece of the concrete pie. Now I am strictly handling the heavy briefcases filled with the rectangular paper bills, but I elevated my entire mental architecture far beyond a regular street hustle. I am legally securing the heavy patterns on my original blueprint, treating my immaculate street game exactly like a highly valuable intellectual property. The jealous rivals are desperately trying to copy my majestic movement, but they are blatantly violating the heavy copyright that I permanently stamped on this metrical soul and borough. I'm sitting in the smoky back room of the classic diner, sipping the vintage champagne from the crystal flutes and studying the complicated legislative gaps to ensure my massive empire remains entirely bulletproof. My black pager is constantly vibrating with the heavy numerical codes, but my lawyers wearing the expensive tailored suits are the ones actually delivering the devastating court decisions to the local competition. I am the sole authentic inventor of this luxurious lifestyle, establishing the heavy international standards for the undisputed Brooklyn royalty. We went from the freezing concrete corners to the heavy executive chairs, securing the exclusive patents and navigating the dangerous millionaire stairs. The fake imposters try to steal the blueprint, but they violating the heavy copyright. We pouring a premium dark liquor and shining incredibly bright. We went from the freezing concrete corners to the heavy executive chairs, securing the exclusive patents and navigating the dangerous millionaire stairs. The fake imposters try to steal the blueprint, but they violating the heavy copyright. We pouring a premium dark liquor and shining incredibly bright. I tell my personal driver to slowly pull the 95 luxury vehicle up to the curb, stepping out into the pouring rain with the heavy umbrella and the dark Versace shades. I am walking directly into the underground club, smelling like the expensive imported cologne and the thick cigar smoke. The beautiful women wearing the heavy gold hoop earrings are completely mesmerized by the massive diamond rings aggressively shining on my thick fingers. But I am not simply throwing the physical cash into the air for the cheap entertainment. I am demanding the absolute maximum financial compensation for every single breath I take inside this chaotic environment. I am drafting a heavy legal contract
tracks on the yellow paper notepads, legally owning the exclusive rights to the entire neighborhood distribution. They try to find a tiny loophole in my flawless paperwork, sending the undercover federal agents to take the blurry surveillance photographs from the unmarked vans. But my operation is mathematically sealed, a completely untouchable monopoly that successfully transitioned from the dirty pavements to the absolute highest peak of the financial food chain. I am dropping these heavy poetic syllables like a certified mafioso scholar, constantly outsmarting the corrupt system and permanently locking the heavy vault. We went from the freezing concrete corners to the heavy executive chairs, securing the exclusive patents and navigating the dangerous millionaire stare. The fake imposters try to steal the blueprint, but they violating the heavy copyright. We pouring the premium dark liquor, shining incredibly bright. We went from the freezing concrete corners to the heavy executive chairs, securing the exclusive patents and navigating the dangerous millionaire stairs. The fake imposter try to steal the blueprint, but they violating the heavy copyright. You pouring the premium dark liquor and shining incredibly bright. The absolute heavyweight champion. Own your masters and protect your intellectual property. Brooklyn permanently. We stepping back out into the night.
We trading the street corners for the expensive penthouse suites. Listen to the heavy syllables and watch the throne. The heavy rain is violently pouring down on the black tinted windows of the 95 Mercedes Benz. I am sitting comfortably in the premium leather back seat, wearing the colorful Coogee sweater hidden securely underneath the massive black leather trench coat. The heavy gold Jesus pieces resting perfectly on my chest, the constant shining reminder of the miraculous elevation from the freezing project hallways. I remember standing in the freezing snow with the holes in my cheap sneakers, actively dodging the unmarked police cruisers and mathematically counting the crumpled $5 bills. Now I am aggressively popping the corks on the expensive vintage champagne bottles, pouring the bubbling liquid directly into the crystal flukes while the thick cigar smoke fiddles up the luxurious cabin. My black Motorola pager is constantly vibrating on my hip, flashing the secret numeric codes from the loyal street associates, successfully moving the heavy product across the state lines. I tell the driver to slowly pull the heavy luxury vehicle directly in front of the classic midnight diner. The neon sign is violently flickering in the dark, and I already know the jealous rival bosses are sitting inside the corner booth, nervously sweating completely through their cheap Italian suits. I step out into the freezing puddle, holding the heavy black umbrella and carrying a massive leather briefcase filled entirely with the crisp $100 bills secured by the thick rubber bands. We breathing the heavy Brooklyn smoke, stacking the paper incredibly high, watching the jealous competitors slowly wither and mathematically die from the dirty concrete pavement to the massive velvet throne. We completely control it, this dangerous burrow and breaking the heavy bone. We breathing the heavy Brooklyn smoke and stacking the paper incredibly high, watching the jealous competitors slowly wither and mathematically die from the dirty concrete pavement to the massive velvet throne. We completely control it, this dangerous burrow and breaking the heavy bone. I slowly push the heavy glass doors open and walk directly into the quiet diner. The analog jukebox in the corner is softly playing the classic soul record. The entire room completely freezes the exact second I step onto the checkered floor. You can physically feel the heavy intimidation dropping the temperature in the room by 20 degrees. I slide my massive frame into the red leather boat that caused from the competition, placing the heavy briefcase directly onto the wooden table without uttering a single aggressive syllable. My reputation is mathematically bulletproof. Do not ever need to raise my heavy voice to successfully communicate a highly dangerous threat. They look at the massive diamond rings aggressively shining on my thick
fingers, instantly realizing that my financial resources and my street military are completely unmatched in this entire metropolitan jungle. We finalized the heavy transaction in absolute silence, exchanging the firm handshakes that seal the permanent fate of the entire neighborhood. I lead the dider and step back into the luxurious vehicle, instructing the driver to immediately head back to the underground club where the beautiful ladies wearing the thick gold hoop earrings of paisley waited. We are celebrating the massive victory with the premium dark liquor, dropping the heavy cigar ashes directly onto the expensive imported Persian rugs. I am the absolute undisputed king of this country's environment, painting the cinematic masterpieces with the heavy fountain pen and the yellow Leo note that we breathe in the heavy Brooklyn smoke and stacking the paper incredibly high, watching the jealous competitors slowly wither and mathematically die from the dirty concrete pavement. Second, that's the velvet throne. We completely controlling this dangerous bubble when breaking the heavy bone. We breathe in the heavy Brooklyn smoke and stacking the paper incredibly high, watching the jealous competitors slowly wither and mathematically die from the dirty concrete pavement to the massive velvet throne. We completely controlling this dangerous burrow and breaking the heavy bone. Undisputed ruler of the East Coast. Keep the champagne glasses completely full, and the circle incredibly tight. Brooklyn permanently. We stepping back into the shadows. Retrading. Retrading. We retrading. Retrading.
Yeah. We're Brooklyn that let the heavy bass drop. It completely vibrate the cold concrete. It is the undisputed king of the coast stepping into the room. Listen to the absolute magnificent truth. I am waiting to wrap entirely in the expensive silk sheets, feeling the heavy gold chain resting comfortably against my chest. I clearly remember the freezing Brooklyn winters when we had absolutely nothing to eat except the cheap corner store sardines and the stale bread. We were standing on the dangerous intersections, rubbing our freezing hands together, desperately praying for a tiny piece of the massive financial pie. Now I am constantly rocking the colorful imported sweaters and the heavy dark Versace shades just to block out the flashing camera lights. The black pager on my hip is continuously buzzing with the heavy numerical codes from the loyal associates, moving the physical product across the distant state lines. I step directly out of the luxurious penthouse suite and jump completely into the heavy black Lexus. The analog dashboard is glowing and the tape deck is loudly blasting the heavy soul from boom bap. We are mathematically calculating the master profit margin, stacking the rectangular paper bills until they physically touch the ceiling of the safe house. The federal agents are sitting patiently in the unmarked vans, taking the blurry surveillance photographs. But my legal paperwork is absolutely flawless, and my expensive lawyers are wearing the tailored suits. I transform from a starving corner hustler into a certified heavyweight champion, effortlessly, completely commanding the entire metropolitan borough with the heavy iron fist. We went from the freezing concrete corners to the heavy velvet cones, building a massive empire and breaking the jealous competitors' bones. Pop the expensive champagne and let the heavy bubbles rise to the top. The Brooklyn hustle is a permanent marathon, and it will never completely stop. We went from the freezing concrete corners to the heavy velvet thrones, building a massive empire and breaking the jealous competitors' bones. Pop the expensive champagne and let the heavy bubbles rise to the top. The Brooklyn hustle is a permanent marathon, and it will never completely
freestyle. I ain't sitting comfortably at the heavy mahogany dining table, casually consuming the finest imported steak and the heavily buttered lobster tails. The beautiful women are pouring the expensive vintage wine directly into the crystal glasses, completely mesmerized by the heavy diamond watch aggressively shining on my left wrist. But do not ever let the smooth, sophisticated exterior completely fool your judgment, because I still keep the heavy metal securely tucked underneath big expensive tailored trench coat. The jealous rivals are constantly plotting in the garg and fill the alleys, nervously whispering my name and desperately hoping to catch me slipping on the wet pavement. But my street intuition is incredibly sharp. I can physically smell the bitter betrayal floating in the human night air long before they even make a single calculated move. I am navigating this dangerous concrete jungle with the absolute precision of a decorated military general, turning the microscopic investments into the unimaginable massive fortunes overnight. We are drinking the premium dark liquor, we dropping the heavy cigar ashes directly onto the expensive imported Persian rods, loudly laughing at the foolish individuals who originally doubted our magnificent elevation. I am painting a gibbon masterpiece with these heavy syllables, describing the beautiful struggle and the undeniable heavy triumph of the authentic street survivor. We went from the freezing concrete corners to the heavy velvet thrones, building a massive empire, breaking the jealous competitors' bones. Pop the expensive champagne and let the heavy bubbles rise to the top. The Brooklyn hustle is a permanent marathon, and never completely stop. It was all a massive dream until we made it the permanent heavy reality. Keep stacking the paper and never look backward. Brooklyn, permanently. We stepping out into the night. Yeah. Dim the lights down low. Let the heavy turntable needle find a perfect groove. We are taking a smooth trip to the wooden floor tonight. Lace up your classic skates and keep your balance completely centered. This is that uncut Long Beach velvet. Listen to the heavy funk bounce. I am laying all the way back on the velvet couch, watching the ceiling fan spin slowly in the humid evening air. The heavy landline phone rings twice, but I let the analog answering machine catch the message, because I am already completely in my zone. I grab my black pager off the glass coffee table, checking the glowing green numbers and seeing the homies are already gathering down at the classic Indo roller rig. I throw on the crisp oversized jersey and smooth out my braided hair, taking my absolute time, because a true player never rushes his majestic entrance. I step out into the warm California night, unlocking the heavy doors of the long vintage Cadillac, sitting beautifully on the concrete driveway. I slide a classic analog cassette tape directly into the stereo deck, twisting the heavy volume dial until the high pitch synthesizer completely melts into the midnight breeze. I drop the heavy gear into drive, hitting the hydraulic switches to make the front bumper progressively bounce. Just one time before I slowly roll out onto the main boulevard. The sweet smell of the heavy chronic smoke is floating right out of the open window, mixing perfectly with the cool ocean wind. We gliding completely smooth across the polished wooden floor, keeping the heavy and analog flavor alive and leaving them begging for more. No stress and absolutely no drama inside the classic heavy ride. Just a pure West Coast rhythm taking us on a massive midnight slide. Yeah. We gliding completely smooth across the polished wooden floor, keeping the heavy and analog flavor alive and leaving them begging for more. No stress and absolutely no drama inside the classic heavy ride. Just a pure West Coast rhythm taking us on the massive midnight slide. For the heavy Cadillac into the neon parking lot, instantly hearing the heavy and analog bass thumping directly through the brick walls of the building. I step through the double glass doors and the entire atmosphere is completely electric. The mirror bar is stealing slowly and casting 1,000 tiny lights across the massive wooden arena. Elope with this jockey is actively working the dual turntable, scratching their heavy vinyl records and keeping the funky guitar licks perfectly synchronized with the bouncing rhythm. The homie for lacing up that classic four-wheel skateboarding incredibly smooth and executing the complicated backward moves with absolutely zero effort. I step directly onto the floor, gliding effortlessly to the heavy bass line, observing a beautiful lady smiling and completely feeling the magnificent West Coast vibration. We do not need any unnecessary physical altercations or heavy street politics tonight, just a smooth vocabulary and the undeniable heavy charm that mathematically controls the entire environment. I am passing the heavy paper wrap perfectly tight, sharing the magnificent good vibes and keeping the entire situation completely peaceful. The local police cruisers are slowly rolling past the building outside. We are keeping the operation perfectly legal, strictly focusing on the positive energy.
We got it completely smooth across the polished wooden floor,
Keeping the heavy and aloe flavor alive,
leaving them begging for more.
no stress and absolutely no drama.
Classic heavy ride,
Just a pure West Coast rhythm.
taking us on a massive midnight style.
Yeah,
Completely smooth across
keep your
the
balance
polished wooden
perfectly
floor.
centered. Never let a paranoia interrupt your midday glide. Long Beach permanently.
Heavy ride,
Yeah, we rolling out into the cool breeze.
Lean back and let the heavy and analog bassline wash completely over you. We are taking a slow glide down the sunny Pacific coast on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Keep your fresh white sneakers completely clean and let the rhythm dictate your steps. It is that original, authentic Long Beach flavor. Listen to the incredibly smooth bounce. I wake up incredibly late on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. The heavy California sun is shining directly through the wooden window blinds. I stretch my long legs and slowly walk over to the closet, pulling out a crisp white t-shirt and the heavily creased khaki pants. I lace up the classic canvas sneakers, making absolutely sure there are zero scuff marks on the white rubber. The silver pager on the kitchen counter starts vibrating with the numeric code from the homies, letting me know that the heavy neighborhood barbecue is already underway down by the Pacific coastline. I step out onto the warm concrete driveway and grab the heavy green water hose, taking my absolute time to carefully wash the classic 64 convertible until the chrome rims are blindly reflecting the blue sky. I grab a dusty analog cassette tape from the glove compartment, sliding it smoothly into the vintage stereo deck and turning the heavy volume knob until the high-pitched sensitizer completely fills the humid air. I drop the heavy vehicle into the drive gear, hitting the hydraulic switch to make the front bumper aggressively bounce. Just one time for the local neighborhood kids watching from the sidewalk. I am cruising incredibly slow down the main Palm Tree Boulevard, leaning way back in the driver's seat with my left hand lazily resting on the wooden steering wheel. The sweet smell of the heavy chronic smoke is floating right out of the open window, mixing perfectly with the salty ocean breeze.
we rolling incredibly smooth, straight down the sunny neighborhood block. The heavy and analog bass is ticking exactly like a rhythmic clock, bouncing on the heavy hydraulics and touching the beautiful blue sky. Watching the incredible West Coast scenery slowly passing right by. We rolling incredibly smooth, straight down the sunny neighborhood block.
Yeah,
The heavy and analog bass is ticking exactly like a rhythmic clock, bouncing on the heavy hydraulics and touching the beautiful blue sky.
watching classic lowrider into the crowded beach parking lot, immediately smelling the heavy barbecue charcoal burning on the rusty metal grills. The homies are aggressively slapping the heavy dominoes onto the wooden picnic tables, laughing incredibly loud, celebrating a beautiful weekend without a single drop of unnecessary stress. I step out of the heavy vehicle and the massive crowd immediately parts exactly like the Red Sea, paying the absolute maximum respect to the smooth operator. The local disc jockey is actively spinning a heavy black vinyl records on the analog turntables, scratching the classic funk breaks and keeping me inside your block party, constantly moving in a perfect synchronized harmony. We are passing the heavy paper wrap perfectly tight, sharing the magnificence and good vibes, and leaving all the unnecessary street drama completely outside the chain link fence. The local police cruisers are slowly rolling past the park perimeter. The officers are glaring hard duty tinted glass, desperately hoping to find a convenient reason to shut down our magnificent celebration. We are keeping the entire situation completely peaceful and legally bulletproof, strictly focusing on the positive energy and the undeniable heavy brew. I grab a fresh plastic gut, then they completely to the brim with the cold gin and the sweet juice, taking a slow sip and observing my beautiful people thriving in the middle of this concrete jungle. Man, right, absolutely no distractions, just the authentic human connection, the heavy and analog rhythm, and the absolute pure essence of the California lifestyle. We're gonna keep this heavy funk flying loud until the street lights automatically flicker on and the glowing moon takes over the entire sky. We're calling incredibly smooth straight down the sunny neighborhood block. That heavy and analog bass taking exactly like a rhythmic glide, bouncing on the heavy hydraulics and touching the beautiful blue sky, watching the incredible West Coast scenery slowly passing right by. Hey, yeah, keep it incredibly smooth and completely laid back. Never let anybody interrupt your daily glide. Long Beach permanently, we stepping out into the evening breeze.
Turn the heavy bass down just a little bit and let the melody ride. Talking the midnight glide. Turn the heavy bass down just a little bit and let the melody ride. We taking the midnight glide down the dark avenue. Nothing but the yellow street lights and the classic chrome. Listen to the incredibly slow over the rhythm. The sun finally hits below the Pacific Ocean, making the entire California sky in the deep shades of purple and dark blue. I am stepping out of the crib wearing the crisp oversized suit and the fresh braided hair, smelling strictly like the expensive cologne and the sweet and don't smoke. I grab my silver pager off the glass table, shaking the glowing ring numbers and seeing that the local house party is already completely packed to the ceiling. I walk out to the driveway and unlike the heavy doors of the vintage Cadillac, the velvet interior is looking incredibly soft and luxurious underneath the street lamp. I slide a brand new analog cassette tape directly into the stereo deck, turning the heavy volume dial to the high-pitched synthesizer. It's completely vibrating the one steering wheel. I am dripping incredibly slow down the dark boulevard, riding the heavy hydraulic suspension and floating directly over the cracked pavement, exactly like a phantom. The warm night breeze is blown perfectly through the open window, mixing with the heavy and analog rhythm. It creates the ultimate laid-back atmosphere. I am not rushing to any specific destination because the actual walls completely dictates the tempo of the entire city. Just by cruising through the neighborhood, we glide and completely smooth underneath the yellow street lights, keeping the heavy analog flavor alive through the California night. No stress and absolutely no drama inside the classic heavy ride. Just a pure West Coast rhythm taking us on a massive midnight slide.
black up to the crowded house party, parking the massive vehicle directly on the front lawn. Because the street is already completely full. The heavy farm is cracking and shaking the brick foundation of the building. And the entire neighborhood is out here celebrating the beautiful weekend. I step out of the velvet seat and smoothly glide the record through the front door, handing my heavy coat to the homies and grabbing a red plastic cup filled to the absolute top with the cold gin and the sweet juice. The beautiful ladies are looking absolutely flawless, moving rhythmically to the heavy bass line, spinning indirectly from the black vinyl records on the analog turntables. A couple of jealous individuals are standing in the dark corner, nervously watching my every single move. But I am completely ignoring the negative vibration and the heavy insecurity. I'm strictly here to enjoy the heavy analog groove. So slowly two-step on the wooden floor and keep the positive energy constantly circulated through the entire room. We do not need any heavy weapons or unnecessary physical altercations tonight. Just a smooth vocabulary and the undeniable heavy charm that mathematically controls the entire environment. Keep it strictly on the smooth frequency. Never let the paranoia interrupt your midnight glide. We stepping back out into the cool breeze.
We are taking a completely smooth ride right down the sunny Pacific coast. Grab your red plastic cup and fill it up directly to the brim. It is that original, authentic Long Beach flavor. Listen to the incredibly smooth bounce. I wake up incredibly late in the afternoon with the heavy California sun shining directly through the window blinds. I stretch my long legs, slowly walk over to the vintage refrigerator, pouring the heavy splash of the gin and mixing it perfectly with the sweet juice. The entire neighborhood is already completely alive. I can hear the heavy and the loud funk playing loudly from the massive wooden speaker sitting across the street. I grab my black pager off the wooden nightstand, reading the glowing green numbers and realizing the entire crew is already gathering down at the local concrete park. I take my absolute time, throwing on the oversized flannel shirt and lacing up the crisp white canvas sneakers with the flawless precision. I step out onto the warm pavement and unlock the doors of the classic 64 convertible. I slide directly into the premium leather seat, turn the heavy metal ignition key and immediately hit the hydraulic switches to make the front end aggressively bounce. I slide a dusty cassette tape directly into the dashboard deck, cranking the analog volume dial until the massive subwoofers in the trunk are violently shaking the chrome license plate. I am cruising incredibly slow down the main Palm Tree Boulevard, leaning way back in the driver's seat with my left hand lazily resting on the wooden steering wheel. The sweet smell of the heavy chronic smoke is floating right out of the open window, mixing perfectly with the salty ocean breeze.
We rolling incredibly smooth straight through the neighborhood block. The heavy analog bass is ticking exactly like a rhythmic clock, bouncing on the heavy hydraulics and touching the sunny blue sky. Watching the beautiful West Coast scenery slowly passing right by. We rolling incredibly smooth straight through the neighborhood block. The heavy analog bass is ticking exactly like a rhythmic clock, bouncing on the heavy hydraulics and touching the sunny blue sky. Watching the beautiful West Coast scenery slowly passing right by.
I finally pull the classic lowrider into the crowded park, immediately smelling the heavy barbecue charcoal burning on the rusty metal grills. The homies are aggressively slapping the heavy dominoes onto the wooden picnic tables, laughing incredibly loud, celebrating the beautiful weekend. I step out of the heavy vehicle in the mass, a crowd immediately barge exactly like the Red Sea, paying the absolute maximum respect to the smooth operator. The local disc jockey is actively spinning the heavy black vinyl record on the analog turntables. Stretching the classic foot wrecks and keeping the entire block party constantly moving in a perfect synchronized harmony. We are passing the heavy paper rap perfectly tight, sharing the magnificent goodbyes and leaving all the unnecessary street drama completely outside the chain link fence. The local police cruisers are slowly rolling past the park perimeter. The officers are glaring hard through the tinted glass, desperately hoping to find a convenient reason to shut down our magnificent celebration. But we are keeping the entire situation completely peaceful and legally bulletproof, strictly focusing on the positive energy and the undeniable heavy groove. I grab a fresh plastic cup, taking the so sip and observing my beautiful people riding. And in the middle of this concrete jungle, there are absolutely no distractions, just the authentic human connection, the heavy and outlaw wisdom, and the absolute pure essence of the California lifestyle. We're on an incredibly smooth, straight through the neighborhood block. The heavy analog bass is ticking exactly like a rhythmic clock, bouncing on the heavy hydraulics and sunshine, the sunny blue sky. Watching the beautiful West Coast scenery slowly passing by. Straight through the neighborhood block, the heavy analog bass, bouncing on the heavy hydraulics and suction, the sunny blue sky. Watching the beautiful West Coast scenery slowly passing right by. Keep it incredibly smooth and completely laid back. Never let anybody interrupt your daily glide. On base permanently. He's stepping down into the breeze. Yeah. No artificial shortcuts, just the raw unadulterated California funk. Listen to the heavy orchestration of the concrete streets. I strike the heavy vintage piano keys and the entire Metropolitan skyline begins to violently shake. I am standing directly in the center of the massive studio, conducting this heavy urban symphony with a sharp razor blade and a spool of 2-inch tape. The amateur musicians are constantly begging for a microscopic moment of my valuable time, but they completely lack the intense military discipline required to survive inside my vocal booth. I will ruthlessly force you to repeat the exact same vocal cadence 75 consecutive times until your lungs are completely exhausted, because a genuine West Coast masterpiece demands the absolute flawless execution. I am digging deeply through the dusty crates of the forgotten vinyl records, meticulously extracting a single heavy drum kick and mathematically combining it with a thick analog bass line that physically crushes your rib cage. The rival record labels are constantly sending their corporate spies into my neighborhood, desperately trying to steal the sacred handwritten blueprints of my acoustic architecture, but they simply cannot artificially replicate the heavy soul that organically drips from these thick copper cables. I am the undisputed godfather of this heavy rhythmic foundation, turning the heavy metal knobs on the console until the voltage completely blows the massive studio monitors. When the heavy and the long bass line drops and the entire neighborhood freezes, we are orchestrating the absolute masterpiece and spreading the California breeze. The high-pitched synthesizer was gutting directly through the humid evening air. We demand a maximum undeniable respect from every single individual standing there. When the heavy and the long bass line drops and the entire neighborhood freezes, we are orchestrating the absolute masterpiece and spreading the California breeze. The high-pitched synthesizer was cutting directly through the humid evening air. We demand
demand the maximum undeniable respect from every single individual standing there. I'm trying to step away from the massive mixing console, riding the freshly recorded cassette tape, then walking directly out into the blinding California sunshine. I smoothly drop my heavy frame into the creamium leather interior with the classic 64 Impala, whipping the authentic wood grain steering wheel with absolute authority. I forcefully push the heavy tape directly into the vintage dashboard deck. In the exact millisecond the instrumental begins to play, the massive hydraulic suspension violently downses the heaviest steel chassis off the hot pavement. I'm cruising slowly down the iconic Palm Tree Boulevard, and you can physically see the thick acoustic wave distorting the atmospheric pressure around my vehicle. The corner hustlers and the street veterans immediately pause their daily analog operations, slowly nodding their heads in absolute synchronized harmony with my heavy drum pattern. The local law enforcement cruisers are nervously rolling down their windows, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the heavy rhythm echoing off the brick walls. The fake competitors are sitting inside the cheap recording booths, violently pulling their hair out because they realize they are mathematically incapable of reaching this specific altitude of musical royalty. I am not simply creating a temporary street anthem. I am heavily chiseling my permanent facial profile directly into the granite mountainside of this entire global culture. Heavy in the love baseline drops and the entire neighborhood freezes. We are orchestrating the absolute masterpiece, spreading the California breeze. The high-pitched synthesizer was cutting directly through the humid evening air. We demand the maximum undeniable respect from every single individual standing there. We are orchestrating the absolute masterpiece, spreading the California breeze. The high-pitched synthesizer was cutting directly through the humid evening air. We demand the maximum undeniable respect from every single individual standing there. Yeah, the true architect of the heavy California sound, strictly analog machinery and unbreakable street principles keep the heavy hydraulics bouncing.
We are generating a completely different level of analog voltage today. I am talking about the raw electrical power running directly through the concrete streets. Protect the heavy acoustic patents and lock the studio vault. Listen to the heavy current flow. I walk directly into the recording facility and it looks exactly like a massive industrial power station. I am physically connecting the thick copper cables to the analog mixing console, engineering the heavy high voltage system that is mathematically designed to completely overload the metropolitan grid. Every single time I push the heavy physical slider on the board, I am carefully regulating the raw electrical currents, ensuring that the heavy kick drum hits with the absolute maximum mechanical force. We do not use any fragile shortcuts. I am physically splicing the heavy magnetic tape with a razor blade, building an impenetrable acoustic architecture from the absolute ground up. The shady record executives in the expensive tailored suits are constantly circling the building like hungry vultures, desperately trying to steal my physical blueprints and claim my complex analog inventions as their own. They want to quietly take the intellectual property right out of my hands, sliding the thick paper contracts across the wooden table and hoping I am foolish enough to surrender my master tapes for a quick stack of $100 bills. But my mind operates with the freezing cold precision of a legal scholar. I completely understand the intricate laws of this dangerous jungle, and I am fiercely protecting my heavy acoustic patents. I sign my name with a heavy fountain pen, legally securing the permanent ownership of every single heavy bass line and every single piercing synthesizer that my brain successfully generates. They try to drag me into the dusty and analog courtrooms to drain my energy, but my foundational arguments are completely bulletproof, built on the solid rock of absolute authentic originality. When the heavy electrical current starts flowing and the massive bass drops, we are overloading the city power grid and heavily calling the cops. Defend the original blueprints
blueprints and fiercely protect the heavy intellectual right. We are mathematically dominating the entire industry throughout the freezing night. When the heavy electrical current starts flowing and the massive bass drops, we are overloading the city power grid and heavily calling the cops. Defend the original blueprints and fiercely protect the heavy intellectual right. We are mathematically dominating the entire industry throughout the freezing night. I disconnect the heavy cables, grab the freshly pressed vinyl record directly from the studio lab, step out into the blinding California sun. I drop the heavy wax directly into the customized turntable installed inside my classic 64 convertible, hitting the heavy hydraulic switches to make the metal chassis aggressively bounce. As soon as the needle physically touches the groove, the massive subwoofers in the trunk begin to violently push the heavy air, practically causing a minor earthquake on the asphalt. I am cruising slowly down the main boulevard, and you can literally see the street lights violently flickering because my analog frequency is actively interrupting the municipal power systems. The local street soldiers are standing on the corners, completely mesmerized by the sheer mechanical perfection of the heavy rhythm, recognizing that this specific level of quality cannot be artificially manufactured in a cheap corporate laboratory. I am actively laying down the heavy underground wiring for the future generations, establishing the permanent electrical infrastructure that will keep this entire massive culture properly illuminated for the next 50 years. The jealous competitors are constantly blowing their internal fuses. Their cheap studio equipment is completely catching on fire because they simply cannot handle the massive voltage of my original, undisputed ideas. I am operating as the sole proprietor of this heavy sonic monopoly, sitting comfortably at the top of the concrete pyramid, now refusing to ever compromise my strict architectural standards. We are turning the heavy analog knobs completely to the maximum limit, permanently blowing the massive speakers and demanding the absolute undivided respect from every single individual walking on this pavement. When the heavy electrical current starts flowing and the massive bass drops, we are overloading the city power grid and heavily calling the cops. Defend the original blueprints and fiercely protect the heavy intellectual right. We are mathematically dominating the entire industry throughout the freezing night. When the heavy electrical current starts flowing and the massive bass drops, we are overloading the city power grid and heavily calling the cops. Defend the original blueprints and fiercely protect the heavy intellectual right.
Step directly into the acoustic laboratory and lock the heavy soundproof door behind you. There are absolutely no digital shortcuts inside this specific building. Just the massive analog mixing boards, the heavy magnetic tape, and the pure mathematical science of the heavy rhythm. I am calibrating the actual heartbeat of the entire West Coast. Listen to the heavy mechanical precision. I am standing directly over the massive analog console, studying the glow of meters and adjusting the heavy physical sliders with the absolute precision of a certified brain surgeon. The atmosphere inside this room is incredibly thick, completely filled with the heavy smoke and the undeniable pressure to manufacture a monumental historical classic. We do not possess any cheap digital screens or artificial plugins to magically fix a terrible vocal performance. If the delivery is not completely flawless, you have to step right back into the isolated vocal booth and spit the heavy syllables directly into the vintage microphone all over again. I am physically cutting the 2-inch magnetic tape with the sharp metallic razor blade, splicing the heavy drum breaks manually to construct an absolutely impenetrable sonic foundation. My fingertips are permanently stained from flipping through the endless dusty crates of the vintage vinyl records, aggressively searching for that one specific isolated horn stab or that incredibly rare piano chord that will elevate this entire instrumental into another geographical dimension. I load the heavy vinyl sample directly into the drum machine, physically tapping the rubber pads until my wrists are completely exhausted, forcing the heavy kick drum and the sharp snare to strike your eardrums with the maximum physical impact. I am not simply recording a temporary piece of musical entertainment. I am meticulously engineering a highly dangerous acoustic weapon designed to completely paralyze the entire concrete metropolis. When the analog magnetic tape starts spinning and
when the heavy bass line drops. We are freezing the entire Metropolitan Avenue and heavily calling the cops. The high-pitched synthesizer is sliding completely out of the heavy atmosphere. This is the authentic original frequency that the entire neighborhood wants to hear. When the analog magnetic tape starts spinning and the heavy bass line drops. We are freezing the entire Metropolitan Avenue and heavily calling the cops. The high-pitched synthesizer is sliding completely out of the heavy atmosphere. This is the authentic original frequency that the entire neighborhood wants to hear. The massive mixing session finally concludes precisely when the early morning sun begins to rise over the tall green palm trees. I eject the heavy cassette tape from the recording deck, carefully place it inside my pocket, and step out onto the sun-drenched pavement to conduct the ultimate neighborhood acoustic evaluation. I smoothly slide into the premium leather seat of my classic 64 convertible, turning the heavy metal ignition key and feeling the massive engine rumble directly underneath my feet. I grab the heavy hydraulic switch box resting on the dashboard, aggressively lifting the front bumper to the sky before dropping it violently back down to the hot asphalt. I push the fresh cassette tape directly into the stereo system, cranking the heavy volume knob completely to the maximum limit. The instantaneous physical reaction is absolutely phenomenal. The massive customized subwoofers in the trunk are vibrating so violently that they are practically shaking the chrome license plate completely off the vehicle. I am cruising slowly down the main boulevard, and this crystal clear analog frequency is actively bouncing off the brick walls of the apartment buildings, forcing every single pedestrian to immediately stop their daily routine and rhythmically nod their head to the heavy tempo. The local street soldiers standing on the corners are instantly recognizing the flawless acoustic mathematics, throwing up their heavy hand signs and paying the maximum undivided respect to the absolute master of the ceremony. My heavy pager is constantly vibrating on my hip with the urgent numerical messages from the record executives, but I am completely ignoring the plastic device because my current focus is strictly dedicated to the beautiful geometry of the streets. When the analog magnetic tape starts spinning and the heavy bass line drops, we are freezing the entire Metropolitan Avenue and heavily calling the cops. The high-pitched synthesizer is sliding completely out of the heavy atmosphere. This is the authentic original frequency that the entire neighborhood wants to hear. Magnetic tape starts spinning and the heavy bass line drops. We are freezing the entire Metropolitan Avenue and heavily calling the cops. The high-pitched synthesizer is sliding completely out of the heavy atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. I am the exact individual who drafted the architectural blueprints and physically constructed this entire city of sound with my own bare hands. I leap down at this burning hot asphalt from the penthouse view, and my cerebral cortex is absolutely freezing cold. Listen to the frequency of genuine independence. I confidently step out of the dark shadows and take a massive deep breath, permanently leaving all of that toxic and chaotic garbage millions of miles behind my rear view mirror. But regular people on the street corners are constantly whispering, actively collecting the dirty rumors and placing the miserable financial bets on my immediate and catastrophic downfall. They loudly proclaim that I foolishly left millions of dollars sitting on a wooden table, that I am an absolute lunatic who decided to walk away from the most lucrative criminal enterprise on the entire West Coast. But they completely lack the intellectual capacity to understand the massive difference between cheap timber and very paper currency and a genuine immortal legacy. I am absolutely not going to share my sacred acoustic sanctuary with the artificial studio gangsters who actively utilize my beautiful music as a convenient camouflage for their incredibly stupid and violent neighborhood politics. I meticulously packed up my incredibly expensive and analog equipment, secured my original master tapes, and silently walked out through the front door without ever dropping a single dramatic syllable. Now I am meticulously constructing my own completely independent and unstoppable empire, laying down a heavy foundation brick by heavy brick, establishing a structural base that cannot be penetrated by any flying projectile. I am currently sitting inside a brand new
recording facility, placing my hands directly on the massive mixing console and feeling this colossal creative energy violently pulsing through my veins once again. I am completely reinventing this classic California frequency, making this deep beat in the log bass line significantly heavier, and soon in this high pitch is the size of the beat, incredibly piercing and absolutely hypnotic. I am calculating the perfect acoustic mathematics that will force this entire gigantic metropolis to hold, escalate the breath and rhythmically nod its head to my brand new heavy anthem. When this heavy in the low bass line violently breaks free and completely shatters the burning concrete, we are constructing a brand new empire, and we are dictating our unbreakable law on the street. And through this lead, so my golden era was finished, but I'll return to violently reclaim my legitimate crown. As fast as California rhythm strikes directly at the target and permanently shuts the fake competitors down. When this heavy and a low bass line violently breaks free and completely shatters the burning concrete, we are constructing a brand new empire, and we are dictating on unbreakable law. They coolest leaders, so my golden era was finished, but I return to violently reclaim my legitimate crown. Classic California rhythm strikes directly at the target and permanently shuts the fake competitors down. I smoothly wrote my freshly customized black lowrider onto the sun-drenched avenues of Los Angeles. Your heavy chrome rims are blinding, they reflecting the tall green palm trees, while the hydraulic suspension system smoothly drops the heavy chassis almost entirely to the burning hot asphalt. I blast my brand new unreleased recording at the absolute maximum volume. And this incredibly dense rhythmic frequency begins to ruthlessly slice directly through the thick metro-cussing atmosphere. I cruise directly past my old historical neighborhood, slowly navigating through those exact same familiar intersections. Where we originally started this incredibly long marathon with completely empty pockets and massive astronomical ambitions. The local street soldiers immediately stopped their daily operations, dropping their activities to watch my classic vehicle pass with a long and heavily respectful stare. Because they instantaneously recognize this flawless and signature boss aesthetic. Down mathematically. I am absolutely
This is not just another cheap street recording. This is actual sonic mathematics. We are building this massive empire, starting from the very first heavy drum kick. Just recline your seat, relax your mind. You listen to this flawless rhythm. I am sitting directly behind this gigantic mixing console in the absolute darkness, operating exactly like a highly experienced surgeon, preparing for the most complicated medical procedure. I am completely surrounded by the blinking red indicator lights and the endless miles of tangled analog cables. The mainstream industry is constantly demanding us to manufacture the raw material as rapidly as possible. They strictly want to generate a quick financial profit and immediately transition to the next fake artificial project. But a genuine cultural masterpiece is never born in a state of panic or heavy rush. It requires an absolutely maniacal level of concentration and a 100% unwavering dedication. I could comfortably spend several consecutive weeks just to mathematically calculate the perfect acoustic snap on a single snare drum, ensuring that this deep, heavy bass line is not simply playing inside your headphones, but physically vibrating directly inside your chest cavity. The young amateur artists are constantly walking into my recording facility, desperately hoping to receive that magical golden ticket to the top of the commercial billboard charts. But they are completely unprepared for this exhausting military discipline. I ruthlessly force them to re-record the exact same vocal settings 50 consecutive times until every single vowel and every single consonant lands perfectly on this happy instrumental with a terrifying surgical precision. Because when this specific
acoustic music finally leaves the acoustic perimeter of this isolated room and escapes onto the burning concrete streets. It is mathematically obligated to sound like an absolute indestructible monolith. Absolutely zero compromises, absolutely zero weak links in the chain. Just the pure, unadulterated, 100% authentic California funk that forces this entire massive concrete metropolis to completely free. And listen to the broadcast. When this heavy California baseline begins to slowly, violently shake your entire neighborhood black, we are establishing our own independent rule, and we are dictating this undeniable heavy law. The high-pitched synthesizer smoothly glides through the atmosphere, making the hydraulic jump to the sky. This is that original classic analog sound that permanently eliminates your daily stress and gets you high. When this heavy California baseline begins to slowly, violently shake your entire neighborhood block, we are establishing our own independent rules, and we are debating this undeniable heavy law. The high-pitched synthesizer smoothly glides through the atmosphere, making the hydraulics jump to the sky. This is that original classic analog sound that permanently eliminates your daily stress and gets you high. A final intricate mix has finally completed, and now it is time for the ultimate and most important street evaluation. I grab this freshly recorded and log cassette tape, step out of the suffocating studio environment onto the sun-drenched parking lot, and smoothly slide into my classic vintage lowrider. I turn the heavy ignition key, roll down the dark tinted windows, and insert the magnetic tape directly into the premium dashboard stereo system. The exact millisecond that the first heavy chord strikes the speakers, the massive multi-ton machinery literally comes alive. Finally vibrating through every single piece of polished chrome, I slowly roll out onto the wide massive avenue, and this incredibly dense acoustics frequency begins to completely dominate the surrounding ghost specs. The regular pedestrians are involuntarily stopping on the concrete sidewalks. Their necks are beginning to rhythmically nod to the heavy tempo, completely unaware that their cerebral cortex has already been permanently hijacked by my invisible sonic wave. The muffled police cruisers are watching me pass with a heavy suspicious glare, but they are absolutely powerless to stop this lethal musical magic that is currently unifying to the entire heavily divided and fractured sea. I physically observe the other rival producers desperately attempting to miserably copy my unique signature style. They purchase the exact same expensive synthesizer and the heavy drum machine, but their final audio tracks always sound incredibly flat and completely lifeless, because they are foolishly attempting to steal a calculated mathematical formula, possessing absolutely zero understanding but the deep street philosophy that firmly serves as the foundation for every single beat I construct. This authentic music is organically generated from the burning hot asphalt, from the harsh smell of burning rubber.
They always say that at the absolute top of the world it is way too cold and incredibly lone. You look at these shining gold chains and the bright camera flashes, naively believing that this is the actual definition of genuine happiness. But you do not see the massive bleeding scars that are securely hidden underneath thick, expensive silk shirt. Just listen to my heavy confession, while my heart is still beating in this crazy rhythm. I clearly remember those severe times when we were dividing a single plate of cheap soup for 3 people. When the only source of light in our freezing cramped room was a dim street lamp shining through the window. My mother was working 3 exhausting shifts, working her hands literally to the dome, just so we could wake up the next morning and not feel that sharp dull pain inside our empty stomachs. I swore to the heavens while kneeling on the floor that one day I would absolutely pull us out of this endless suffocating poverty, that I would buy her a massive safe house where she could finally close her tired eyes and sleep without any fear. But this long journey to the top turned out to be brutally paved with broken glass and poison fake promises. I entered this deadly game genuinely thinking I could change its fundamental rules, but this ruthless industry slowly and surely started changing my own reflection. My oldest friends are now looking at me with the hungry wolf-like stare, their eyes filled to the brim with dark jealousy and unspoken malice. They smile widely, showing their white teeth when we meet, but behind my back they are already tightly gripping the loaded pistol. This constant exhaustion, paranoia prevents me from sleeping for even a single second. I sleep wearing a heavy bulletproof vest, listening closely to every minor rustle outside my front door. I gave this world my entire naked soul, turned it completely inside out on every single track, and they are still patiently waiting for me to finally stumble and fall face first into the muddy pavement.
Lord, tell me, is there any peace for a soldier whose war never actually ends? When the closest people sell you genuine love for a handful of these dirty paper bills. I stubbornly continue to walk through this absolute pitch black darkness, holding nothing but a spark of hope in my hands.
My soul is covered in deep wounds, but I will never allow them to see my heavy tears. Lord, tell me, is there any peace?
Lord, tell me, is there any peace for a soldier whose war never actually ends? When the closest people sell you genuine love for a handful of these dirty paper bills. I stubbornly continue to walk through this absolute pitch black darkness, holding nothing but a spark of hope in my hands.
My soul is covered in deep wounds, but I will never allow them to see my heavy tears. Every single night in absolute loneliness, I drop down from my knees and tearfully beg for forgiveness for those terrible sins I had to commit, simply for our physical survival. These freezing streets leave us absolutely no choice and place heavy weaponry into our hands, ready before we even manage to properly learn how to read. I see these young kids on the corner blindly copying my walk, my aggressive style. They naively think the gangster lifestyle is a beautiful Hollywood movie with the perfect cinematic ending. But I wanna scream at them with all of my might, stop immediately before it becomes way too late. Behind all this fake street romance, there are only freezing concrete maximum security cells and endless rows of identical gray tombstones. I have lost way too many loyal brothers in this meaningless war over pieces of asphalt that we never even legally own on paper. We brutally murder each other while our actual enemies sit safely in their expensive corporate offices, calculating the massive profits for my spilled blood. My heart literally tears into tiny pieces when I see yet another mother falling to her knees in front of the yellow police tape, screaming from the unbearable agony. This pain has become my eternal companion, my heavy cross that I am obligated to carry on my shoulders until the very end of the line. And even if my physical life is violently cut short to murder on some dark city intersection, just know that every single word I spoke was the pure, absolutely unadulterated truth. I live for my people, and I am ready to die right now, so my poetry can permanently ignite, saving lives in your exhausted mind.
Lord, tell me, is there any peace for a soldier whose war never actually ends? When the closest people sell you genuine love for a handful of these dirty paper mills. tell me.
Yeah. You could physically lock my body inside 4 dark walls, but my mind will always fly completely free. This is a dedicated message to every single brother and sister who is losing their hope right now in these dark alleyways. Through the heavy tears, through the bitter betrayal, through all of this unbearable agonizing pain, just listen to me very carefully. I wake up in the middle of the night. I wake up in the middle of the night with the cold sweat violently running down my cheeks. And outside the window, the endless police sirens are wailing once again. This is the official lullaby of our forgotten ghetto, a permanent heavy reminder that death is constantly walking somewhere nearby, breathing directly into the back of my neck. I grip my fist tightly underneath the heavy blanket because the intense paranoia is eating me completely alive from the inside out. In this brutal and unforgiving world, genuine trust is significantly more expensive than pure solid gold, and a human life is absolutely worthless. You look directly into my exhausted eyes and you ask me why they are heavily bloodshot, why I'm carrying this sleep. It's incredible, massive gravity upon my tired shoulders. I will give you the absolute truth, because I physically witnessed my young brothers drop into the hot asphalt without ever getting a chance to learn the definition of true freedom. Their beautiful dreams are permanently shattered by a random flying bullet. Their massive universal potential is violently erased into the dust for some dirty paper on the corner block. The corrupt institutional system is intentionally trapping us inside these concrete cages, systematically depriving us of a proper education, handing us the deadly poison, impatiently waiting for us to completely destroy ourselves. But my eternal spirit cannot be broken. I will scream this heavy truth until my lungs violently rupture. I will speak for every single mother who is shedding the bitter tears over the closed wooden casket of an innocent child. We are permanently stuck inside the belly of this massive beast, fighting every single day for a microscopic piece of happiness that was originally never designed for us to inherit. But I absolutely refuse to drop down to my knees. I will continue marching forward, even if this entire cursed world aggressively turns against me. Keep your heavy head
Elevated, even when the black skies are dropping the pouring rain,
even when the solid ground is crumbling and the light
has permanently left the domain.
They can never successfully break the immortal soul of a genuine soldier fighting the dark. We are searching for the gates
of heaven while our feet are trapped in this hellish park.
Keep your heavy head
elevated, even when the black skies are dropping the pouring rain,
even when the solid ground is
crumbling and the light has permanently left the domain.
They can never successfully break the immortal soul of a genuine soldier fighting the dark. We are searching for the gates
of heaven while our feet are trapped in this hellish park.
I step out onto the hot street and pour a little bit of the strong liquor onto the ground, paying the ultimate heavy respect to my loyal brothers who were taken away by the heavens way too early. The heavy traumatic memories are constantly haunting my cerebral cortex, flashing inside my brain exactly like the frames of an old black and white cinematic movie where the final scene is always incredibly tragic. People will smile genuinely directly into your face, shake your hand with a firm grip, and the exact second you turn your back, they are already sharpening the rusty blade to plunge it deeply into your spine. I can physically feel this poison, this jealousy. These fake associates hiding in the shadows exactly like the venomous snakes, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to execute a belly strike. But I was raised on these severe and unforgiving streets. My survival intuition is significantly sharper than a fresh razor blade. I see completely through their transparent disguise, even when they hide their eyes behind the dark tinted glasses. The hypocritical society desperately wants to see me wearing the orange jumpsuit behind the heavy steel bars. They want to transform me into just another nameless prisoner because they are absolutely terrified of a young individual from the block who knows how to think and articulate the heavy truth. They loudly label me a dangerous menace to society, screaming it from the television screen strictly because I am violently ripping off their beautiful masks and exposing all the disgusting rot they try so carefully to conceal. I am a direct child of this heavy agony. I was born from the cracks in the concrete, and I was baptized by the heavy pouring rain.
I will stubbornly continue to fight for my people. I will write these poetic verses, transforming our collective urban agony into an eternal masterpiece that will comfortably outlive my physical body.
You can physically lock my body behind the heavy steel doors, but you can never successfully trap my eternal soul. I am speaking directly to everybody out there who is desperately struggling just to see another sunrise through the heavy rain and the unimaginable pain. Just listen to the prophecy.
I'm waking up in the middle of the night, covered in cold sweats, staring blankly at the spinning ceiling fan and listening to the distant police sirens wailing in the dark. That is the familiar lullaby of a neglected ghetto, a constant heavy reminder that the Grim Reaper is permanently walking right around the corner.
Yeah. The extreme paranoia got me constantly clutching my heavy weapon, sleeping with one eye completely open, because the trust is an incredibly rare commodity in this dangerous environment. People look into my eyes and they constantly wonder why my vision is so heavily bloodshot, why I'm carrying this massive unbearable weight upon my tired shoulders. It is because I am carrying the tragic memories of 1,000 broken promises and the shattered dreams of my entire generation. I see the young beautiful brothers dying on the freezing concrete pavement before they even reach the age of 21. Their massive potential violently erased by a single piece of flying metal. The corrupt authorities are steadily pushing the deadly poison into our vulnerable communities, intentionally trying to blind us from the actual mathematical truth of our repression. But my mind is a highly fortified weapon, and I am shedding the heavy tears for the single mothers who are now crying over the closed wooden caskets, burying their innocent babies in the freezing dirt. We are permanently trapped inside the dark belly of the beast, desperately fighting for a microscopic piece of the American dream that was never legally designed for us to inherit. But I absolutely refuse to bow down to the pressure. I will continue to spit this heavy, unfiltered truth until my vocal cords permanently bleed.
Keep your heavy head when the violent rain starts pouring down,
even when the entire world is aggressively crumbling and attempting to hold you to the ground.
They can never break the immortal spirit of a genuine soldier fighting through the darkest night.
We are desperately searching for the heavenly days
while trapped inside this hellish fight. Keep your heavy head when the violent rain starts pouring down,
even when the entire world is aggressively crumbling and attempting to hold you to the ground.
They can never break the immortal spirit of a genuine soldier fighting through the darkest night.
We are desperately searching for the heavenly days
while trapped inside this hellish fight.
I step out onto the hot asphalt, I pour a little bit of the dark liquor onto the concrete, paying the ultimate maximum respect to my fallen soldiers who never made it to see its morning dawn. The heavy traumatic memories are constantly haunting my cerebral cortex, violently flashing like a cinematic horror movie directly inside my mind. People would smile warmly directly in your face, shake your hand, and immediately begin plotting your bolts in the physical downfall the second you turn your back. I can physically feel the heavy jealousy radiated from the fake friends, the venomous snakes hiding silently in the tall grass, just waiting for the absolute perfect moment to aggressively strike. But I am navigating this concrete jungle with the calculated grace of a black panther. My street intuition is significantly sharper than the fresh razor blade. A system desperately wants to see me locked permanently inside a maximum security penitentiary, wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, then becoming just another forgotten statistical number in the massive database. But I ain't utilizing this war poetry to completely elevate the consciousness of my people, magically transforming the heavy urban drain into a beautiful and immortal masterpiece. The mainstream media constantly tries to paint my portrait as a violent villain, a dangerous menace to the polite society, strictly because I am speaking the unfiltered brutal reality that they are fundamentally terrified to address on the televisions and screen. I am a direct product of the absolute struggle, born directly from the crack kind drink, been violently baptized in the heavy pouring rain. I will stubbornly continue to ride for my brothers and sisters, speaking the undeniable truth to my physical heart completely. All the Sleestack'z, baby.
Keep it heavy here when the violent rain starts pouring down.
Even when the entire world is aggressively crumbling and attempting to hold you to the ground.
Never wake the road on steer, let the champion win the soul to fight and do the darkest night.
We are desperately searching for the heavenly gates.
While trapped inside his careless mind.
Keep your heavy head up.
Keep your heavy head up.
Keep your heavy head up. Keep your heavy head up. You could physically.
Yeah, I roll out of the mattress before the sun even has a chance to violently hit the cracked pavement. I am looking through the iron bars on my bedroom window, watching the heavy sanitation trucks cleaning up the physical garbage while the political garbage remains securely sitting in the high-rise office buildings. And strategically place the liquor store on every single intersection, intentionally flooding the neighborhood with the cheap poison to keep our heavy minds completely sedated and distracted from the actual mathematical reality. I throw on the heavy black boots and step out onto the hot asphalt, refusing to become just another predictable statistical number for their private and heavily funded prison industrial complex. The patrol cars are slowly creeping down the avenue exactly like a pack of mechanical predators. The officers are heavily gripping their steering wheels and looking at us like we are the invading alien species inside our own geographical territory. But I am not intimidated by the flashing red and blue lights or the shiny metallic badges. I am a fully educated guerrilla soldier operating completely undetected in the middle of this urban war zone. We are mentally dodging the heavy invisible bullets that the corrupt educational system constantly fires at the younger generation, attempting to erase our authentic history and replace it with a fabricated corporate narrative. I am utilizing this heavy analog microphone as a dangerous weapon of mass education, dropping the complicated heavy syllables that permanently shatter the fragile glass of their manufactured illusions. We aggressively breaking the invisible chains that they placed upon the heavy mind, leaving the corrupt and broken system completely and utterly far behind. They violently trying to silence the truth, but we broadcasting the heavy sound, standing incredibly solid and refusing to surrender the sacred underground. We aggressively breaking the invisible chains that they placed upon the heavy mind, leaving the corrupt and broken system completely and utterly far behind. They violently trying to silence the truth, but we broadcasting the heavy sound, standing incredibly solid and refusing to surrender the secret underground. I slide directly into the heavy driver's seat of the classic machinery, hitting the ignition and feeling the massive analog engine violently shake the entire chassis. The heavy bass line starts bumping through the custom speakers. It sounds exactly like a massive marching band preparing for an inevitable physical confrontation. I'm cruising past the massive corporate billboards that are aggressively selling us the things we absolutely do not need, utilizing the psychological manipulation to empty our heavily exhausted pockets. They want you to enthusiastically worship the shiny material possessions, practically begging you to trade your precious eternal soul for a temporary piece of depreciated metal. But I am fundamentally disconnected from their artificial capitalist matrix. I'm actively building an independent and highly lucrative empire, completely outside of their manipulative jurisdiction. I see the record label executives rolling into the neighborhood in their expensive imported vehicles, desperately trying to financially exploit the raw heavy agony of the street and package it into a highly profitable commercial product. I aggressively look them directly in the eyes and tell them to immediately turn their vehicles around, because our heavy cultural suffering is absolutely not available for a cheap retail purchase. We are claiming total and complete ownership of our intellectual and physical properties, planting our heavy boots firmly in the dirt and drawing an impenetrable line in the hot sand. Aggressively breaking the invisible chains that they placed upon the heavy mind, leaving the corrupt and broken system completely and utterly far behind. They violently trying to silence the truth, but we broadcasting the heavy sound, standing incredibly solid and refusing to surrender the sacred underground. We aggressively breaking the invisible chains that they placed upon the heavy mind, leaving the corrupt and broken system completely and utterly far behind. They violently trying to
the silence, the truth, but we broadcasting the heavy sound. Standing incredibly silent and refusing to surrender the sacred underground. The afternoon slowly fades into a highly volatile and dangerous evening. The temperature refuses to drop, and the heavy tension in the air is sticking up the cut with a massive hunting knife. I parked the classic vehicle in the middle of the crowded project courtyard, popping the heavy trunk and letting the analog rhythm completely dominate the surrounding environment. I am actively gathering the younger brothers around the heavy speaker box, violently ripping the artificial blindfolds off their eyes and showing them the actual unedited blueprints of the massive global operation.
I'm looking up at the pitch black sky, and I see the massive blinding spotlight shining directly down on the cracked pavement. The heavy police helicopter is hovering aggressively over the residential neighborhood, violently rattling the bedroom windows and waking up the entire exhausted block. They are constantly searching for a convenient scapegoat, looking for any individual wearing the heavy dark clothing just to completely justify their massive corrupt municipal budget. I am sitting perfectly still behind the steering wheel of the classic heavy machinery, watching the patrol cars aggressively speeding past my rearview mirror with the sirens absolutely screaming. You have to possess a certified degree in psychosocial survival just to successfully navigate a regular Thursday night in this chaotic environment. The system is meticulously designed to instantly trap you inside a heavy steel cage, turning your entire human existence into a profitable statistical number for the private prison industry. I see the local neighborhood actors pretending to be heavily involved in the dangerous street life, completely flexing their imaginary muscles until the actual heavy pressure finally arrives at their front door. The second the red and blue lights start violently flashing, they drop the heavy weapons and immediately start cooperating with the same authorities they were just loudly disrespecting. But I am physically constructed from a completely different and indestructible biological material. I keep my heavy mouth permanently shut and my constitutional rights completely memorized. I am maneuvering through the concrete jungle with the absolute precision of a decorated military veteran, refusing to become just another tragic headline printed in the morning newspaper. The heavy ghetto bird is flying low, it's shining the light on the street. The corrupt authorities are desperately trying to bring the heavy defeat, but we are successfully dodging the tracks and navigating the massive maze, surviving the absolute worst conditions in the middle of the heavy haze. The heavy ghetto bird is flying low, it's shining the light on the street. The corrupt authorities are desperately trying to bring the heavy defeat, but we are successfully dodging the traps and navigating the massive maze, surviving the absolute worst conditions in the middle of the heavy haze. I turn the heavy steering wheel and slide directly into the dark and narrow alleyway, cracking the massive engine and letting the heavy vehicle completely disappear inside the shadows. The atmosphere is incredibly tense, you can literally feel the heavy paranoia violently vibrating through the humid night air. I reach into the glove compartment, but I am not pulling out a physical weapon. I'm pulling out the heavy intellectual knowledge and the unshakable confidence that terrifies the establishment significantly more than any loaded magazine. They are absolutely terrified of an educated individual who thoroughly understands a complication, the legal architecture, and refuses to blindly submit to their aggressive and unlawful intimidation tactics. I watch them harass the innocent pedestrians on the corner, violating their civil liberties and utilizing the heavy physical force just because they are wearing a metallic badge upon their chest. It makes my internal blood completely boil with a heavy concentrated anger, but I mathematically channel that explosive frustration directly into my heavy lyrical delivery. The heavy ghetto bird is flying low, shining the light on the street. The corrupt authorities are desperately trying to bring the heavy defeat, but we are successfully dodging the traps and navigating the massive maze, surviving the absolute worst conditions in the middle of the heavy haze. The heavy ghetto bird is flying low, it's shining the light on the street. The corrupt authorities are desperately trying to bring the heavy defeat, but we are successfully dodging the traps and navigating
conditions in the middle of the heavy haze. Ain't the massive, the massive helicopter finally runs low on the aviation fuel and aggressively pulls away, taking that blinding heavy spotlight back to the municipal airport. The flashing red and blue lights completely fade into the distance, and the heavy neighborhood slowly takes a collective sigh of absolute relief.
I step out. I step out on the front porch and immediately feel the heavy California heat hitting my face. The entire neighborhood is already completely awake and buzzing with the daily chaotic energy. I walk straight down the driveway looking at the classic Chevrolet, sitting incredibly low on the hot asphalt. I hit the heavy hydraulic switches, making the front bumper aggressively bounce before I even put the key inside the ignition. The heavy engine violently roars to life, completely shattering the quiet morning atmosphere. I drop the heavy gear in the drive and start slowly rolling down the block. The massive bass sign in the truck is physically shaking my rear view mirror and rattling the license plate. Everybody on the sidewalk be stopping and staring, trying to figure out exactly who was riding so immaculately clean on the regular Tuesday morning. I got the driver's side window completely rolled down, resting my heavy arm on the door, catching the warm breeze. I see the local street hustlers standing on the corner trying to mathematically calculate the next financial move. I fold on my heavy respectful nod because I completely understand the brutal nature of the daily struggle, but I remain absolutely and completely focused on my own independent and highly lucrative operation. The police cruisers are rolling past my vehicle incredibly slow. The officers are staring hard through the glass, desperately hoping that I make a sudden and foolish mistake. But my paperwork is absolutely flawless and my cerebral cortex is incredibly sharp. I am navigating these highly dangerous streets exactly like a heavy military general, demanding the absolute maximum respect from the environment without ever having to raise my voice. We rolling incredibly heavy through the neighborhood, keeping the vision crystal clear. The heavy West Coast rhythm is the absolute only frequency that we actually hear. Bouncing on the hydraulic suspension, watching the entire city instantly react. We demand the absolute respect, and that is a heavy and undeniable fact. Rolling incredibly heavy through the neighborhood, keeping the vision crystal clear. The heavy West Coast rhythm is the absolute only frequency that we actually hear. Bouncing on the hydraulic suspension, watching the entire city instantly react. We demand the absolute respect, and that is a heavy and undeniable fact. I keep the heavy steering wheel steady, cruising directly past the local burger stand and smelling the heavy charcoal smoke, filling up the humid air. I smoothly pull the heavy machinery into the crowded park, where the brothers are aggressively shooting the basketball and slamming the heavy dominoes onto the wooden picnic tables. It is a beautiful and completely raw symphony of the authentic urban survival. I park the classic vehicle directly under the heavy shade of a massive palm tree, stepping out onto the grass with the absolute unquestionable confidence of a self-made heavyweight champion. We do not need to loudly shout or violently act out to demonstrate our actual power, because the silent visible presence speaks significantly louder than any aggressive vocabulary ever could. We successfully survive the absolute worst and most violent irreverence. I'm forgiving concrete jungle, constantly dodging the heavy crossfire and managing the permanent daily paranoia. Now we simply stand here and enjoy the heavy, beautiful gunshine and the rhythm in that law funk playing loudly out of the massive customized speakers. My much younger generation is looking up at us from the sidelines, gaspily, trying to perfectly mimic the heavy posture and the smooth, unbothered delivery
I pulled him to the side, tell him to stay mathematically focused on the ultimate goal, telling him to successfully avoid the unnecessary architectural traps heavily set by the corrupt system, and demanding that they build a solid, independent financial foundation. We voted incredibly heavy through the neighborhood, keeping the vision crystal clear. And the West Coast rhythm is the absolute only frequency that we actually hear. Suspension, watching the entire city instantly react. Absolute respect, and that is a heavy and undeniable flag. Rolling in pink credit, rolling incredibly. I step out on the front porch. I step out. I step out on the front porch.
Yeah, I remember walking down the freezing avenue with our heavy winter jackets completely zipped up to the chin, sharing a single pair of cheap hay-phones connected directly to a dusty cassette player. We were simultaneously listening to the legendary heavy boom bap instrumental, mathematically memorizing every single complicated syllable and analyzing the philosophical messages of the older generation. We did not possess the financial luxury of the comfortable existence. We were literally splitting a single slice of cheap pizza from the corner bodega because our pockets were completely and utterly empty. But the beautiful reality of the situation was that we never actually felt impoverished, because the heavy brotherhood we maintained was a massive currency that nobody could ever physically confiscate. We spent the endless summer afternoons on the cracked asphalt of the local basketball court, shooting a worn out leather ball through a rusty metal hoop that didn't even have a nylon net. We were violently throwing the heavy elbows in the paint, pushing each other to the absolute physical limit, completely dedicated to elevating our collective stamina and building an impenetrable psychological armor. When the older aggressive kids from the opposite side of the massive housing projects tried to test our daily perimeter, you never took a single cowardly step backward into the shadows. We stood completely back to back in the middle of the dangerous dirt, clenching our heavy fists and mutually deciding that if they wanted to violently strike one of us, they mathematically had to deal with the combined destruction of both. When the entire surrounding neighborhood turns freezing cold, and the heavy shadows begin to fall, you are the absolute first and only reliable brother that I am ever going to intuitively call. We built this impenetrable fortress out of loyalty and a heavy, undeniable mutual trust. And this permanent historical brotherhood is never gonna crumble into the microscopic dust. When the entire surrounding neighborhood turns freezing cold, and the heavy shadows begin to fall, you are the absolute first and only reliable brother that I am ever going to intuitively call. We built this impenetrable fortress out of loyalty and a heavy, undeniable mutual trust. And this permanent historical brotherhood is never gonna crumble into microscopic dust. As we slowly transition into the complicated teenage years, the surrounding environment became significantly more treacherous and incredibly unforgiving. I watched a massive percentage of our childhood associates fall directly into the heavy gravitational pull of the criminal element, trading the brilliant potential for a temporary shiny illusion on the corner. But you were the heavy anchor that consistently kept my fragile ship from violently crashing into the destructive rocks whenever my internal compass was spinning out of control. And I was heavily tempted to participate in the dangerous and illegal activities. You forcefully grabbed me by the collar and aggressively reminded me of the massive promises we made to our exhausted mothers. We used to sit on the concrete stoop of the apartment building until the early hours of the morning, passing the glass bottle wrapped in a brown paper bag, passionately discussing the massive blueprints for successfully escaping this geographical trap. You were the only individual
on this entire planet who never laughed at my monumental ambitions. You actively fueled the heavy combustion engine inside my chest and demanded that I pursue the impossible elevation. You patiently helped me construct my heavy lyrical vocabulary, listening to me furiously, aggressively rap over the instrumental loops, playing loudly from a massive battery-powered boombox sitting on the pavement. You were my absolute harshest critic and simultaneously my most dedicated and loyal supporter. An incredibly rare and beautiful combination that ultimately saved my life. When the entire surrounding neighborhood turns freezing cold, and the heavy shadows begin to fall, you are the absolute first and only reliable brother that I am ever going to it's you really cold. We built this impenetrable fortress out of loyalty and the heavy, undeniable mutual trust. And this permanent historical brotherhood is never gonna crumble into the microscope. When the entire surrounding neighborhood turns freezing cold, the entire surrounding neighborhood, and the heavy shadows begin to fall. You are the absolute first and only reliable brother that I am ever going to intuitively call. We built this impenetrable fortress out of loyalty and the heavy, undeniable mutual trust. And this permanent historical brotherhood is never gonna crumble into the microscopic dust. Now I am slowly looking through a dusty shoebox filled with the fading Polaroid photographs, and I am completely overwhelmed by the phenomenal magnitude of the historical timeline we successfully conquered.
Yeah. We taking a heavy trip all the way back to the original foundation, before the massive commercial contracts and the digital streaming platforms. I'm talking about the humid summer nights and the heavy concrete parks. Let the heavy funk break carry you away. I remember dragging the massive wooden speakers directly out to the neighborhood playground, plugging the thick electrical cords straight into the city street lamp to steal a little bit of power for the heavy amplifier. The entire community was gathering around the basketball court, escaping the suffocating heat of the brick apartments to feel the incredible vibration of the heavy bass line traveling through the soles of their worn out sneakers. The disc jockey was acting like a magnificent street magician, operating two heavy analog turntables with the absolute precision of a surgical doctor, spinning the classic funk records back with the permanently catch the perfect heavy drum break. We did not possess any sophisticated digital technology or expensive promotional budgets. We were simply utilizing the raw atmospheric energy of the block to create an undeniable cultural revolution right there on the cracked pavement. I see the young acrobatic dancers completely taking over the center of the circle, spinning rapidly on a flattened cardboard box, aggressively defying the heavy laws of physical gravity, while the crowd is screaming in absolute pure astonishment. The rhythmic scratching of the vinyl was the only heavy currency that we genuinely recognized, an incredibly powerful sonic transmission that temporarily erased all the severe economic struggles and the heavy gang violence surrounding our immediate perimeter. The microphone had a long tangled cord, and you had to physically snatch it from the previous speaker to mathematically demonstrate your superior lyrical capacity, riding a heavy funk instrumentation with a bouncy and unstoppable verbal delivery. We were establishing the permanent constitutional laws of this massive global culture, utilizing a cheap microphone and a stolen electrical current to broadcast our heavy, magnificent voices directly to the universe. We taking it back to the original concrete block and the heavy analog sound, where the pioneers originally laid the solid foundation deep under the ground. Listen to the vintage breakbeat and the incredible rhythm of the street. This is the authentic heavy culture that the modern industry can never defeat. We taking it back to the original concrete block and the heavy analog sound, where the pioneers originally laid the solid foundation deep under the ground. Listen to the vintage breakbeat and the incredible rhythm of the street. This is the authentic heavy culture that the modern industry can never defeat. The local graffiti writers were
standing silently in the heavy shadows of the park, carrying the rattling metallic spray cans inside their heavy backpacks, waiting for the perfect midnight opportunity to permanently decorate the passing transit trains. It was a massive, beautiful symphony of absolute urban rebellion, a completely unfiltered artistic expression originating from the deepest and darkest forgotten corners of the massive metropolis. The verbal rhyme schemes are relatively simple but incredibly effective, designed specifically to move the massive crowd and keep the heavy positive energy flowing continuously through the humid summer atmosphere. We were passing the heavy microphone from left to right, creating a continuous chain of uninterrupted verbal electricity, throwing the heavy syllables back and forth like a beautiful game of rhythmic ping pong. There were absolutely zero luxury sports cars parked around the perimeter. Nobody was wearing the ridiculous diamond chains or boasting about their massive imaginary banking accounts. The absolute maximum level of respect was strictly granted to the individual who could manipulate the English vocabulary with the greatest amount of original style and undeniable heavy charisma. You had to practically project your voice from the bottom of your heavy diaphragm, cutting directly through the loud distortion of the massive blown out speakers, just to make sure the people in the back of the park could clearly understand your heavy philosophical message. It was the purest and most unadulterated era of the heavy musical expression, a specific moment in chronological time when the passion completely overpowered the desperate desire for the heavy financial compensation. Take it back to the original concrete block and the heavy analog sound, where the pioneers originally laid the solid foundation deep under the ground. Listen to the vintage breakbeat and the incredible rhythm of the street. This is the authentic heavy culture that the modern industry can never defeat. We taking it back to the original concrete block and the heavy analog sound, where the pioneers originally laid the solid foundation deep under the ground. Let's talk about
Let's talk about real ownership. Yeah. Not the cars, not the heavy chains, the actual blueprints, the intellectual property, the things they try to steal when you are not looking. Listen closely to the legal documents. I walk directly into the executive boardroom with a heavy stack of legal papers, completely prepared to defend my original creations from the corporate vultures. They looking at my detailed blueprints, trying to figure out a hidden loophole, desperately attempting to steal the architectural design without paying the proper financial compensation. But I already secured the heavy patents. I successfully copyrighted every single syllable and every single heavy drum kick before I even stepped foot inside the building. You see these young naive artists signing away their entire legacy on a piece of paper, giving up their intellectual property for a temporary shiny chain and the least luxury vehicle. But I am operating strictly like a heavy legal scholar, navigating the complicated judicial system, making sure my original ideas remain exclusively inside my personal possession. They try to take me to the highest court, bringing in the expensive lawyers wearing the tailored suits, trying to invalidate my ownership and claim my heavy rhythm as their own invention. But my foundation is legally bulletproof. Every single sentence I write is a binding contract, signed and sealed with the heavy ink of experience. I am building a permanent independent empire, and the most valuable asset inside the entire vault is the raw intellectual property that my brain successfully generated. Protect the blueprints and secure the heavy patent. Never let them steal the original magic that you are rapping. We own the masters and we control the heavy distribution, executing the flawless intellectual revolution. Protect the blueprints and secure the heavy patent. Never let them steal the original magic that you are rapping. We own the masters and we control the heavy distribution, executing the flawless intellectual revolution. I see the industry operating exactly like a massive criminal syndicate, constantly searching for a vulnerable creative minds and legally exploit. They want to strip you of your fundamental rights, taking the heavy percentage while you do the actual physical and mental labor inside the vocal booth. But I heavily study the legislation. I daily understand the complicated paragraphs and the hidden clauses hiding at the very bottom of the page. You cannot physically steal a brilliant idea when the copyright is heavily registered and defended by an impenetrable
structure a wall of absolute legal certainty. I am stamping my permanent trademarks directly on the culture, ensuring that my future generations will continually collect the heavy financial dividends from the seeds that I am planting today. They want to pirate the unique frequency, duplicating the heavy baseline and selling it as a cheap counterfeit product in the mainstream market. But the authentic original signature cannot be forged by a regular machine. It possesses a specific human frequency that the legal documents actively protect from the thieves. I am writing my own heavy thesis directly on the concrete pavement, proving that the true ultimate power belongs to the original creator, who stubbornly refuses to surrender his intellectual territory. You gotta treat your mind exactly like a highly classified governmental facility, heavily guarding the magnificent ideas before they are officially ready to be released into the public atmosphere.
Protect the blueprints and secure the heavy pen. Never let them steal the original magic that you were rap. We all are masters and we control the heavy distribution, shooting the flawless intellectual revolution. Protect the blueprints and secure the heavy pen. Never let them steal the original magic that you are rapping. We own the masters and we control the heavy distribution, shooting the flawless intellectual revolution.
Yeah, yo. This talk about the absolute latest heist in the modern history is not a heavy bank robbery with the physical weapons. It is the silent theft of the intellectual property taking place right inside the corner offices that extract your pure, uncut genius. Slap a different corporate logo on the packaging, then leave you completely empty-handed, standing in the freezing cold. But I ain't fundamentally shifting the entire paradigm, establishing the heavy legal precedents that will permanently alter the landscape of this entire business. I am the sole proprietor of my heavy artistic destiny, the undisputed owner of the architectural blueprints that are currently reshaping the skyline of the city. We are fighting the heavy battles in the courtroom of life, bringing the undeniable evidence and striking the heavy gavel directly on the wooden bars.
Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Let's talk about.
Let's talk about real ownership, not the cars, not the heavy chains, the actual blueprints. The intellectual property, the things they try to steal when you are not looking. Listen closely to the legal documents. I walk directly into the executive boardroom with a heavy stagger. Let's talk about real ownership, not the cars, not the heavy chains. Let's talk let's talk about real ownership, not the cars, not the heavy chains, the actual blueprints, the intellectual property, the intellectual property. Yeah, let's talk about real ownership, not the cars, not the heavy chains. Let's talk about real ownership, not the cars, not the heavy chains. Let's talk about real ownership. Let's talk about real ownership. Let's talk about real ownership. Let's talk about let's talk about real ownership.
Yeah, let's talk.
Yeah. This ain't money. This ain't money. They say money makes the world revolve on its axis, but I see you making everybody completely dizzy. We chasing these rectangular pieces of printed paper, trading our precious time for a temporary physical illusion. Listen to the mathematics. I wake up early in the morning before the sun is even shining, observing the entire city running in the desperate miracle, and everybody is violently chasing the currency, sweating and bleeding just to accumulate a little bit of extra paper in the vault. They look at the television and they see the luxurious vehicles, the heavy golden chains and the massive mansions sitting on the hill. The television is actively broadcasting the hit body frequency, convincing the younger generation that their entire human value is strictly determined by the balance in their checking account. I see the brothers turning completely cold, betraying their closest childhood friends over a minor financial disagreement. The psychology of the dollar bill is a highly dangerous chemical substance. It enters your bloodstream and completely rewrites your fundamental DNA. You start looking at everybody like a potential business transaction, constantly calculating the profit margins instead of recognizing the actual human soul. I remember when we used to be completely broke, but our spirits were incredibly wealthy, sharing the last piece of bread and laughing in the middle of the heavy pouring rain. Now the pockets are getting significantly heavier, but the genuine smiles are becoming incredibly rare to locate in this concrete jungle. The paper is slowly burning a massive hole directly through the fabric of our society, and everybody is blindly ignoring the heavy smoke filling up the room. The currency is constantly circulating, but the soul is going bankrupt. We trading our eternal freedom for a temporary physical product. Look at the heavy paranoia hiding behind the expensive designer shades. The money is a sharp illusion that slowly and inevitably fades. The currency is constantly circulating, but the soul is going bankrupt. We trading our eternal freedom for a temporary physical product. Look at the heavy paranoia hiding behind an expensive designer shades. The money is a sharp illusion that slowly and inevitably fades. I step into the financial district, watching the corporate executives in the tailored suits, playing the massive game of Monopoly with actual human lives. They manipulate the numbers on the digital screens, artificially inflating the markets while the regular people are struggling to simply purchase the basic groceries. The concept of money is nothing but a collective hallucination, a heavy psychological agreement that we all decided to blindly accept without asking any logical questions. You can accumulate a massive mountain of physical wealth, stacked 100 until they physically reach the ceiling of your penthouse apartment, but you cannot purchase a single additional second of time when the final flight begins to violently tick. I am investing my personal energy into the permanent knowledge, accumulating the intellectual property that nobody can ever confiscate or steal from my possession. The true wealth is the absolute freedom of a mind, the capacity to walk through this chaotic environment without being controlled by the heavy gravitational pull of the dollar. I see the people wearing the most expensive garments in the world, driving the most exclusive imported machinery, but their internal existence is completely hollow and devoid of any genuine substance. They are a prisoner to their own extravagant lifestyle, constantly terrified that somebody is going to successfully grind against them and take away their shiny physical possession. The currency is constantly circulating, but the soul is going bankrupt. They're trading our eternal freedom for a temporary physical product. Look at the heavy paranoia hiding behind the expensive designer shades. The money is a sharp illusion that slowly and inevitably fades. And keep vision perfectly focused on the actual permanent reality, and never allow the green paper to successfully blind your original perspective. We definitely require the finances to smoothly navigate
navigate through this modern capital, this architecture. But you must aggressively refuse and let the finances become your ultimate master. I am carefully stacking the heavy vocabulary, depositing the syllables, direct me into the instrumental bank account. Generating a massive cultural dividend that will continue to pay out long after I am permanently gone.